Chapter 15:20. Mao Yao was instantly engulfed by the flames. Sensing the scorching temperature of the burning sparks, Mao Yao knew that something was wrong. He swung his dragon tail and tried to extinguish the flames. However, the flames were formed by the collapse of Chu Liuyue's god territory. What burned was not fire, but shocking energy. Moreover, the sparks were scattered all over the place. Mao Yao could not dodge at all. A spark landed on its scales, quickly leaving behind a charred mark. Mao Yao was angry and annoyed. Why is this god territory so strange? Even its scales were burned by the flames. However, Mao Yao did not have time to think about this, because he realized that his entire body was surrounded by flames. There was no way to retreat. Through the sea of flames, everyone could barely see the scene inside. Mao Yao was struggling frantically as if he wanted to escape. Unfortunately, the surroundings were sealed, and it was too late for him to escape. Moreover, as time passed, the sea of flames was shrinking bit by bit. It wanted to bind Mao Yao directly. He could not break free. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes and revealed a satisfied smile. She had not used her god territory for a long time and was afraid that she would be rusty. However, it seemed that there was no need to worry now. Moreover, she had just crushed the golden god tribulation and broken through to become a high god. At this moment, her internal and external injuries were recovering at an astonishing speed. Her mood became much more relaxed. She had walked the line between life and death. Fortunately, the bitterness was over and the sweetness was coming. Everything that belonged to her had returned. Everyone looked at this scene in a daze, and some were still unable to react. This. Shangguan Yu turned the tables. Not only did she withstand Mao Yao's third attack, but she also gave him a counterattack. Looking at the huge body struggling in the sea of flames, many people's eyes twitched. Not long ago, this person was very arrogant and domineering, and wanted to take Shangguan Yu's life. However, in the blink of an eye, she had fallen to such a state. Thinking about it, it was really laughable. On the other hand, almost everyone in Shanghai Yu thought that she was doomed today. But now, he was still alive and well. In fact, he had even risen from the middle ninth stage to the high god realm. All in all, the whole thing was very confusing. Even though they had seen it with their own eyes, many people were still in shock and had yet to recover. Even Mu Hongyu, Lin Qifei, and the others were shocked. Obviously, the development of the situation had exceeded their expectations. Amidst the dead silence, someone couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Why does the divine realm in Shangguan Yu look so familiar? Luo Shishir turned her head in surprise. Fourth brother, what did you say? Luo Yanlin stared at the silver-red sea of fire in the sky with a frown. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. Shishir, she said her name is Shangguan Yu. Luo Shishir nodded. Yes. At that time in Fangzhou City, she had admitted it in front of everyone. I heard that she's Senior Shangguan's favorite descendant. Back in the primeval wilderness, she was, which you? Luo Yanlin asked again. Luo Shishir found it strange, but she shook her head. We don't know. She only said that she was called by this name, but no one knew which character it was. Fourth brother, is this important? Luo Shishir paused and asked hesitantly. Luo Yanlin didn't say anything. He turned around and looked up. The black stone walls of the Donghuang Bell Tower were dark. He stared at a certain spot for a long time before he looked away. Chu Luyue looked down. She sent out a stream of force from her palm. Dumpling and Ziqin, who had been knocked to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time, were also affected by Chu Luyue's breakthrough. Their injuries were quickly recovering. Then, with Chu Luyue's help, the two flew up and arrived in front of Chu Luyue. Dumpling raised its head and flapped its wings, trying to get closer. However, he only managed to raise his wings halfway before they fell back down. Chu Luiyue saw that half of its wings were broken. A long scratch spread across its body. It was a bloody mess. It was a ghastly sight. The crimson gold celestial phoenix was an ancient divine beast. Its physical strength was extremely strong. Apart from a great phoenix dragon of the same level, there was no one else who could injure it to such an extent. A cold light flashed in Chu Luiyue's eyes. He raised his hand and gently covered Dumpling's wound. Gentle and vast power flowed into Dumpling's body. It tilted its head and rubbed against the back of Chu Luiyue's hand. Its eyes were bright. Although it was seriously injured, it had always been lively. Now that it saw that Chu Luiyue had broken through to become a great god, it was overjoyed. It had completely forgotten about the previous troubles. It didn't even care about its own injuries. Chu Luiyue saw that it was still lively despite its mobility problems. He sighed in relief. After carefully treating Dumpling's wounds, Chu Luiyue looked at Ziqin on the other side. Its injuries were much more serious than Dumpling's. Although its strength was not much different from Dumpling, it had two great phoenix dragon wing bones in its body. Therefore, when Mao Yao attacked Ziqin, it was especially ruthless. Moreover, Ziqin's bloodline was slightly inferior to that of an ancient divine beast. It was more or less at a disadvantage. Both of its wings were broken and there were many wounds on its body. It was dispirited and on the verge of death. If Chu Luiyue hadn't broken through, it probably wouldn't have been able to hold on for much longer. Fortunately, the two great phoenix dragon wing bones in its body were not damaged. Chu Luiyue thought silently. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to find another pair. After using the great phoenix dragon's bones, he was no longer interested in anything else. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Then, she treated Ziqin's injuries and summoned it back. With her power nourishing it, the two of them would recover much faster than before. After taking care of them, Chu Luiyue turned her gaze and looked in a certain direction. Whoosh! The heavenly square cauldron drew a perfect arc in the air and quickly returned. Chu Luiyue weighed the item in her hand and finally chose to put it away. After doing that, Chu Luiyue looked at the sky again. At this moment, Mao Yao's body was covered in wounds. It was suffering unspeakably. Everyone could hear one or two painful dragon roars from time to time. Outside the boundary, the few young Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan juniors saw this scene and came back to their senses after a long time. They were shocked, flustered, and exasperated. Sheng Wanyu. Do you really want to go against the Great Phoenix Dragons? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1521. As they spoke, they seemed to want to barge in. However, the wizardry barrier had been reinforced by the elders, and they could not break it. After several failed attempts, those people finally realized that the situation was out of their control. Chu Luiyue looked up lazily and glanced at them. Am I the one who wants to go against you, or are you the one who won't let me off? Mao Yao not only brought people to Lingxiao College, but also used extreme means to force his way in. She had not settled the score with Mao Yao for what he had done to her. The bet is not over yet. If you want me to stop now, you'll have to admit defeat. Chu Luiyue said slowly. There was a hint of a smile on her lips, as if she was telling a funny joke. The people in the sky were speechless. In fact, they were in a dilemma. If things were allowed to develop like this, no one could say for sure what kind of situation it would end up in. Mao Yao sounded like he was being tortured. But if they admitted defeat now? What if Mao Yao blamed them later? And they did not know how to explain it to their clan. Sheng Wanyu. Mao Yao also heard Chu Luiyue's voice, and he was even angrier. I'm here. Senior, if you have something to say, just say it. Chu Luiyue smiled and said. Mao Yao was so angry. She thought that Sheng Wanjing was already shameless enough. She didn't expect Sheng Wanyu to be even better than him. At a time like this, she could still say such words so calmly. He tried to restrain himself, and finally shouted. The bet is over. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and seemed to be surprised. It's over. Immediately. Immediately. Then, this time, it's my win. Chu Luiyue asked slowly. Mao Yao choked. After a short silence, he finally gave an answer. Fine, you win. Chu Luiyue then revealed a sincere and dazzling smile. She raised her finger slightly, and the silver-red sea of fire in the sky was quickly extinguished. It turned into faint flowing light and flew back to Chu Luiyue. In the end, it silently entered her body. The whole process was smooth and neat. Before the crowd could react, they saw the flames that were originally burning fiercely dissipate in an instant. And Mao Yao, who was trapped in it, finally showed his true body. Ha! On the quiet Qingming Square, a low chuckle suddenly sounded. As soon as the laughter appeared, it was suppressed. However, very soon, all sorts of stifled laughter could be heard from all over the crowd. Everyone tried their best to hold it in, but the pairs of eyes that were looking at the sky as if they were watching a joke revealed their true thoughts at this moment. Mao Yao was originally in an unbearable torment, but suddenly, a stream of light flashed in front of his eyes, and the flames instantly faded away. It was stunned for a moment before it realized that it had already escaped from the sea of fire. Then, he heard laughter coming from below. Almost instinctively, it quickly glanced down. As soon as he looked, he saw countless pairs of eyes staring at him with different expressions. He clearly saw mockery and ridicule in them. When they sensed Mao Yao looking over, many people immediately looked away. But in Mao Yao's eyes, how could he not understand their expressions and reactions? They were obviously mocking him. Mao Yao's eyes were red, and he was furious. He did not need to look to know how pathetic he was at this time. The flames had left countless wounds on his body. The originally magnificent and beautiful scales were now charred black, and some of the more serious ones were even faintly curled up. The great phoenix dragon race valued corpses very much, and they also valued their scales very much. It took a lot of effort to cultivate this dragon armor, but now, it was all destroyed by Sheng Wanyu. Mao Yao suddenly turned his head and stared at Chu Luiyue. Sheng Wanyu. You. Very good. Chu Luiyue did not seem to understand his threat at all and asked casually. Thank you for your praise, Senior Mao Yao. Since the bet is over, I have won. Then. Can we write off all the things that happened before? It would have been fine if she did not say this, but now that she said this, Mao Yao was so angry that his whole body was trembling. She actually had the cheek to ask this question. She had injured him to such an extent, but she did not feel guilty at all. After today's bet, the grudge between Sheng Wanjing and the great phoenix dragon race will be settled. And you. The matter of using the corpse will be settled from now on. Mao Yao said word by word in a fierce tone. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth, and it was filled with deep hatred and anger. This is over, but today, my dragon armor was burned, and I will not let it go so easily. Sheng Wanyu, you'd better think carefully about how to solve this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, this shouldn't be considered my fault, right? Chu Luiyue interrupted Mao Yao's words with a smile on her face, but her eyes were indifferent and deep, like a glacier that would not melt for 1,000 years. Everything that happened just now should be counted in the bet. When you made the bet, you only said that I would win if I could take 3 of your moves. You didn't say, I can't fight back, did you? Mao Yao choked. It did not say. But that was because it did not expect that she would have the chance to fight back. Mao Yao stared at her and suddenly sneered. You're quite capable. You can even get a divine realm. It suddenly turned its head and looked at Elder Meng. Meng Xian, you guys are really good to her. You're even willing to give her this divine realm. Elder Meng laughed. That's her divine realm. What's there to be reluctant about? Digression. Tomorrow at 12:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1522. Mao Yao's ferocious expression froze. Everyone on Qingming Square widened their eyes when they heard this. Their faces were filled with astonishment. At first, they were shocked by the sudden turn of events and did not have time to think about what was going on. Now that the dust had settled, they finally realized that something was amiss. The god domain suddenly flew over from Mount Pingming. How did it become Shangguanyu's? Impossible. Mao Yao retorted instinctively. How could anyone in the world possess a god domain before becoming a high god? There must be something fishy going on. What's so impossible about that? If the god domain doesn't belong to her, why would it listen to her? Elder Meng looked at Mao Yao as if he was looking at an idiot. Mao Yao, even if you're not a human, you should know that, right? Do you want me to explain it to you in detail? Mao Yao's eyes were red. He was so angry that he could not speak for a long time. Then, he suddenly turned his head and looked at Chu Luiyue. That sharp, cold, and suspicious gaze harshly slashed across Chu Luiyue's body like a sharp knife. Chu Luiyue pretended that she did not see it. After all, she had one. Nothing else mattered. She smiled, her eyes curving into crescents. Senior Mao Yao, if you have any objections, then I can show you again whether the god domain is mine or not. Mao Yao shuddered. Show me again. How? The wounds on his body began to hurt again. No need. Mao Yao replied in a fluster. He did not want to repeat what happened just now. In fact, with his strength, he could easily deal with a high god. Even if Shangguanyu broke through from the middle stage of the 9th level to the high god, he would not be a threat to him. However, the strangest thing was the god domain. For the time being, it was her divine realm. Its power was far beyond the divine realm of an ordinary high god. The fact that the realm of the gods could easily devour the golden divine tribulation and stand up to the power of his bloodline was simply unbelievable. Who knows what methods you used? Of course, Mao Yao was not convinced. He was even resentful. After today's battle, its reputation was completely ruined. Including the entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. It still didn't know how to explain it when it returned. This trip was really a double loss. Chu Luiyue, on the other hand, was quite open-minded. Naturally, I used my own methods. You also saw the situation just now. No one came forward to help, right? As for this deity domain, if it wasn't for your help today, I'm afraid that it would have taken quite some time before I could summon it back. This time around, I truly have to thank you, Senior Mao Yao. Mao Yao didn't understand what was going on, but he could guess what was going on. When he heard the latter half of the sentence, he was so annoyed that his blood boiled. It came here to teach Shangguanjing and Shangguanyu a lesson, not to help her break through. What was going on now? Mao Yao stared at her for a while before he suddenly smiled coldly and looked at Elder Bo Yen. Good. Good. Bo Yen, so this is how Lingshao College teaches its students. Arrogant and conceited. Impudent and rude. No matter what, it was an important existence in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. Today, it was offended and contradicted by Shangguanyu. Now, she had heard it to this extent, but she didn't regret it at all. This was too much. At this moment, Elder Bo Yen was looking at Chu Luiyue with great joy. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that these few years of waiting were not in vain. He was also stunned when he was suddenly called out. "Senior Mao Yao, why do you say that? You were the one who suggested today's bet, right? You only agreed to your request. What's wrong with that? If she didn't agree, you wouldn't have let it go, right? Besides, you barged into Lingxiao College today. This debt, we haven't settled with you yet." Lingxiao College didn't like to cause trouble, but it didn't mean that they were afraid of it. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race was an ancient divine beast and was indeed powerful. However, Lingxiao College had been in the Divine Ruins world for tens of thousands of years and was not to be trifled with. If they really wanted to talk about it carefully, Mao Yao was in the wrong first. Was just forced to retaliate. One was an ancient divine beast with a noble status, while the other was a young junior of the college. Wasn't it very clear who was the one bullying the weak? Even if this matter was spread out, everyone would be able to see who was right and who was wrong at a glance. Mao Yao was originally in the wrong. Now that he had lost this bet, he had lost his imposing manner. For a moment, he only felt extremely vexed. You guys are so biased towards her and taught her to be so arrogant and domineering. One day, it will cause big trouble. Senior Mao Yao, you don't have to worry about this. A clear and low voice suddenly sounded. It was as cold as ice and snow, but it also carried an unattainable nobility and disdain. Mao Yao turned around and saw Rong Xiu, who had been silent for a long time, finally open his mouth. He was suspended in mid-air with one hand behind his back. There was a cluster of golden flames burning quietly on the fingertips of his other hand. He moved his fingers slightly and the flame was instantly extinguished. Then, he raised his chin slightly and looked into Mao Yao's eyes. There seemed to be waves surging in his deep phoenix eyes. The next moment, Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. If I's princess consort causes any trouble, I will naturally take responsibility. This sentence was clear and indifferent, but it was so domineering that it couldn't be disobeyed. Chapter 1523. Such open and above-board favoritism, such clear and obvious doting. Rong Xiu's words seemed to be polite, but the translation was, "She is mine. If she gets into trouble, I will bear the consequences." How can other people speak? Chu Luiyue had a thought. She tilted her head and glanced at Rong Xiu. She seemed to have thought of something. She raised her eyebrows slightly and her lips curled up. As if sensing her gaze, Rong Xiu suddenly looked over. Their eyes met, but it felt like 10,000 years. Chu Luiyue's heart felt like it had been smashed by something. Something gushed out from the bottom of her heart. It was sour, sweet, and soft, and it easily swallowed her. She even slowed down her breathing. It was as if everything in front of her was a dream. The slightest movement would shatter it. They had clearly been together all this time. Although they were so close, she felt as if they had not seen each other for a very, very long time. Only this feeling of being protected and favored had always existed. From a very, very long time ago until now, it had always been the same. Rong Xiu suddenly waved at her. Come here. His voice was low and pleasant. It was a gentleness and affection that outsiders had never seen before. Chu Luiyue moved and headed in Rong Xiu's direction. However, just as she moved, a subtle and clear sound suddenly came from below. Chu Luiyue instinctively looked down, but her pupils instantly shrank. The spring at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain had completely frozen. White and clear frost covered the spring completely, piling up in a thick layer. At a glance, it reflected a clear glow and was bone-chilling. As if sensing her abnormal expression, Rong Xiu's heart skipped a beat and he also looked down. A biting cold aura suddenly flashed across his eyes. Crack. An inch-long crack suddenly appeared on the frozen surface of the spring eye. Hearing the commotion, Elder Bo Yen and the others immediately turned to look. When they saw that the mouth of the spring had been completely frozen, their faces changed. Quick! Triggering heavenly thunder. Elder Bo Yen shouted anxiously. Just now, all of their attention was placed on you, and for a moment, they had actually overlooked this matter. It's too late. Elder Ouyang stared blankly at the mouth of the spring. His face was a little pale. Tianlei, which is triggered by ordinary refining, is useless against this. Besides, who would have the patience to lure Tianlei to land at a time like this? As a matter of fact, this spring should have frozen long ago. However, you had broken through in the middle and attracted the divine tribulation. Thus, it was delayed with great difficulty. But now, the divine tribulation had passed. No one could stop him anymore. Crack. Next to the first crack, a second one appeared. The crack did not appear on the surface of the ice. Instead, it appeared on the bottom of the ice. Under normal circumstances, the cracks in the ice layer were irregular. However, the two lines that appeared now were of the same length, and the lines were perfectly straight. Although it was called a crack, it was more like an invisible knife had carved it out bit by bit. Soon, a third one appeared. This one was slightly curved and presented a perfect arc. Obviously, this was not an accident. It was controlled by an external force. Rong Xiao frowned slightly and immediately attacked. A golden flame flew out rapidly. At this moment, Tianlei was no longer descending continuously. The invisible barrier around the mouth of the spring that blocked Tianlei no longer seemed to be there. That cluster of golden flames directly landed on the layer of ice. However, no matter how the flame burned, the ice layer did not seem to be affected at all. More and more marks appeared on the ice layer, as if they were gradually forming some kind of pattern. The burning golden flame was quickly extinguished and dissipated silently. Rong Xiao's heart sank. He looked at Chu Luiyue. At this moment, she was staring at the mouth of the spring. Her gaze was heavy, as if she had sunk into some kind of deep thought. Rong Xiao knew that something was wrong. He moved his body and immediately flew toward Chu Luiyue. He was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Luiyue. He grabbed Chu Luiyue's hand. Chu Luiyue suddenly came back to her senses and looked up at him. Rong Xiao. Her voice was very soft, but it was very firm. I have to go down. Rong Xiao's hand suddenly tightened. It was not that she did not know how dangerous it was down there. Although she had been summoned back to the deity realm and returned to being a high deity, going down rashly was still a matter of life and death. I'll go for you. Rong Xiao said in a low voice. Chu Luiyue suddenly smiled and intertwined her fingers with his. Since this matter started because of me, I should be responsible for it. If Dumpling had not swallowed the power of Tianlei, things would not have developed to this point. I'll be back soon. She fixed her gaze on Rong Xiao and said. Rong Xiao held her hand tightly, his phoenix eyes deep. You said the same thing last time. But after that, it was the difference between life and death. He went to heaven and hell to find her with great difficulty. Now, before he even had the time to hug her, she wanted to go again. He would never agree to it. Even without you, the spring would erupt sooner or later. Rong Xiao's expression was unusually cold. In the past few years, he had racked his brains and even forcefully sealed a part of her soul and memory, just so that the same thing would not happen again. But the speed of her recovery was far beyond his expectations. So much so that before he could completely solve the problem of the spring, she had already awakened again. But in the end, it was because of me that everyone was in trouble. Chu Luiyue shook her head and smiled. Rong Xiu's heart sank little by little. Crack. More and more cracks appeared on the frozen ice surface. Elder Bo Yen stared at the gradually forming pattern. He felt that it was somewhat familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen it before. His mind spun wildly, desperately trying to remember what it was, but it was still a blank. A chilling aura gradually spread out from the mouth of the spring. On the top of the mountain, the surroundings of the spring were quietly covered with a thin layer of ice. It was like the white frost that fell in the early morning of winter. Soon, the mountain rocks froze and the trees withered. The vitality of the Thousand Wine Mountain seemed to be easily taken away by the white frost. Everything started to turn gray and lifeless at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the white frost had spread from the top of the mountain to the middle of the mountain, and then to the foot of the mountain. It was silent, but extremely terrifying and strange. Elder Bo Yen and the others saw this scene and their faces turned pale. Chu Luiyue suddenly took a step forward. She was already standing very close to Rong Xiu, and now they were almost pressed against each other. Then, she grabbed the front of Rong Xiu's shirt and pulled it down. She tiptoed, raised her face slightly, and kissed him on the lips. Soft and cold. Rong Xiu. Her lips moved slightly, and the words were blurred between her lips and teeth. Release the seal on the green cloud leaderboard. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1524. Rong Xiu's hands held her slender waist tightly, as if he wanted to crush her into his arms and embed her into his flesh and blood. He kissed her back as if he was desperately suppressing something. Only when he smelled the sweet scent of rust did he finally let go of her. His gaze was deep and dark like the sea. There seemed to be a layer of invisible energy that wrapped around her. After a long while, he closed his eyes and hid all the emotions in his eyes. Okay. As his voice fell, a thick cold aura spread out from his body, and a biting cold and powerful force suddenly rushed out from his body. Buzz. A buzzing sound was heard. Everyone heard the sound and turned to look. This sound was actually coming from the Donghuang Bell Tower. On the dark stone wall, several streams of light appeared quietly. This is, Elder Bo Yen looked at this scene in shock. Why did Rong Xiu suddenly summon the Azure Cloud leaderboard? In the entire Lingshao College, other than the deans and a few elders who could do this, the first place on the Azure Cloud leaderboard could also do this. Rong Xiu had dominated the leaderboard for a few years, so this was naturally not a big deal to him. But, why did he have to now? Several streams of light danced and overlapped with each other. Under the sparkling light, names gradually appeared one by one. This sudden turn of events caused many of the students on Qingming Square to fall into a state of confusion. Why did Senior Rong Xiu summon the Azure Cloud leaderboard? Wait. Other than the Warrior leaderboard and the Weapon Craftsman leaderboard, why did the other two leaderboards appear too? Among the 4 leaderboards, he has 2 first places, so logically speaking, he should only be able to summon those 2. Why did the other 2 leaderboards appear together? What is he trying to do? Everyone was dumbfounded. Bo Yen, what is going on? Elder Huafeng frowned. He felt that something was wrong. With Rong Xiu's current strength, summoning the 4 leaderboards was within reason. But the key was, why did it have to be now? Elder Bo Yen was silent for a long time. In fact, he had a guess in his heart. However, that idea was so absurd that he subconsciously rejected it. If that's true. On the 4 black stone walls of the Donghuang Bell Tower, the 4 lists suddenly appeared. Among the neatly arranged rows of names, the dark spots at the top were particularly conspicuous. 2 first places and 2 second places. They all had the same name. The name that had been deliberately erased. Actually, everyone was already accustomed to it. After all, the ascension rankings had always been like this for the past few years. Normally, no one would even take a second look at it. Just as they raised their heads to look at the ascension rankings with puzzled expressions, a golden glow suddenly appeared. Like a ray of light cutting through the darkness, it instantly shone brilliantly. Look! It seems like the number one celestial physician is about to appear. Suddenly, someone exclaimed. In fact, it wasn't just the celestial physician ranking. The black seals on the other three rankings were gradually being lifted as well. It was as if the thick black fog was gradually dispersing, gradually revealing the true scenery hidden behind it. It was also as if something was slowly rising from the bottom of the dark sea, gradually becoming clearer. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths as they watched this scene without blinking. That name had been sealed for a few years, and there weren't many people in Lingxiao College who had seen it back then. To most of the students, it was just a rumor. They had been curious and investigated it, but they had all quietly given up in the end. It was just a name, and it wasn't that important whether they knew it or not. However, at this moment, when they had the opportunity to see that name, they all coincidentally converged their gazes and attention onto the ascension rankings. What kind of person is she to be able to stand side by side with Rongxiao and be on par with him? Between heaven and earth, there was complete silence. As the golden glow streaked across it, a name gradually appeared. It was dazzling. You. No surname, only a single you. On the four lists, the name that had been deliberately erased appeared together. Seeing this scene, many people were stunned. You. No surname. This name. How can someone use only a single word as their name? It was no wonder that everyone was so surprised. In Lingxiao College, the students had different identities. Some inconvenient ones would often choose to use an alias. For example, when Chu Luiyue came, he used the name Chu Yu. The name that was written during the admission test would still be the same name when it appeared on the ascension rankings. Regardless of whether it was a real name or a fake one, everyone had a name and a surname. There had never been a case where there was only a single word. In the crowd, Luo Shishir stared at the word, you, as her emotions churned. She turned to look at Luo Yanlin and asked softly, fourth brother, is the name of Shengguan Yu also you? Luo Yanlin glanced at her with a solemn expression. Then, he nodded. Yes. At first, he was still a little uncertain. But now, everything was laid out before his eyes. She. It was her. Luo Shishir was stunned. In fact, she had already vaguely guessed it in her heart. Now that she received a definite answer, she was not surprised. However, is this really her name? No surname. Luo Yanlin shook his head. She has always used this name in the college. As for her surname, no one knew. In the sky, Chu Luiyue slowly let go of Rongxiao's hand. The boiling feeling between her eyebrows surged again. She took a deep breath. A rainbow light streaked across the sky. Scarlet Cloud's sword was already in her hands. The next moment, she gripped the hilt tightly with both hands and raised the sword high. The sword fell. Heaven and earth shook. Digression, Kavinka's bald February quietly floated by. However, there was one thing to clarify, Rongxiao was not the dean. Cough. At 6:00 p.m., please continue reading. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1525. More than 100 silver sword chi suddenly flew out. Instantly, they covered the entire 1,000-wine mountain. Thud thud. The sword chi flew down and stabbed into the ground fiercely. The rapidly spreading white frost suddenly stopped moving forward. Countless sword chi surrounded the 1,000-wine mountain and formed a gigantic cage, completely sealing the strange cold air. Apart from the sword chi, everything was normal. Within the sword chi, life was extinguished. In the blink of an eye, the trees and grass on the Thousand Wine Mountain had already turned yellow. Some were even charred and curled up. At a glance, it was as if something had sucked away the last bit of life. Chu Liuyue's figure moved, and she went straight for the spring. Shengguan Jing suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. His intuition from his bloodline made him exclaim subconsciously. However, he was very far away from Chu Liyue at this moment and could not stop her in time. Chu Liyue's figure was already like a scarlet sword that pierced straight for the spring. The moment her feet touched the ground and stepped on the white frost that covered the entire mountain, Chu Liyue immediately felt a bone-chilling coldness surging up from her feet. In an instant, it enveloped her entire body. Chu Liyue exhaled gently and instantly condensed into a ball of white mist in the cold wind. Thousand Wine Mountain was as warm as spring all year round because of a special barrier. In her impression, this place had never been so cold. Chu Liyue looked around and finally looked at the spring in the center. At this moment, the strange pattern above the spring was basically three-quarters complete. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Then, she gripped the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand tightly. On the sword, a ball of flames spread rapidly. Half of it was pure gold and the other half was transparent. Heat and cold intertwined. It reflected a ghastly sword light. Now that she had broken through to become a high god and held a venerable divine weapon, she could naturally unleash stronger strength. The sword chi that she released just now could only be maintained for a short period of time. If she really wanted to solve this problem, she had to attack the source. Naturally, it was this spring. Clang! Chu Liyue ruthlessly stabbed his sword into the center of the spring. Crack! A crack finally appeared on the thick layer of ice. Two clusters of flames intertwined and crazily rushed down from the opening. Then, Chu Liyue gripped the hilt of the sword with both hands and spun it with all his might. Crack! Several fine cracks instantly appeared at the edge of the opening. Under the ice, the pattern that was about to be completed seemed to have been slashed in the middle and became mottled and fragmented. A terrifying chill crept up Scarlet Heaven Sword's body. The burning flames on the sword began to extinguish gradually. Even the tip of the sword was quickly covered in white frost. One of the flames was the bloodline fire of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was the karmic fire of the heavenly square cauldron. No matter which one it was, they could definitely be considered the top powers in the world. But at this moment, as soon as it came into contact with the cold air in the spring, it quickly fell into a disadvantage. This was enough to show how powerful it was. Chu Liyue circulated the force in his body as he gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly and continued to stab deeper into the cave. Finally, a gap appeared in the layer of ice. Chu Liyue leaped. His figure immediately disappeared into the layer of ice. Everything happened too quickly. When Chu Liyue's figure entered the spring again, everyone came back to their senses. What is Shengguan Yu doing? She actually went in just like that. That spring is very strange right now. I'm afraid it's dangerous for her to go in. I only have one thought now. So she's the person whose name was erased from the green cloud roll. No wonder. No wonder. But that's not right. Didn't they say that Shengguan Yu is only 17 years old this year? A few years ago, she should still be a little girl. How can she be the one in the rumors? But the name on the green cloud roll has already appeared. Even the god realm has been summoned by her. If it's not her, who else could it be? Everyone was confused and full of doubts. Too many things had happened in a single day today. Each and every one of them was filled with a huge impact, making it difficult for people to cope with. Now, they were even starting to feel numb. Mao Yao looked down at the spring in shock. Chu Liyue's figure had already been swallowed by the ice water and had completely disappeared. At the edge of the broken crack, crimson gold and transparent flames were burning quietly. From the outside, only a small piece of water could be seen under the gap. Perhaps it was because the sky was too dark or for some other reason, but the water was dark, making it difficult to see clearly. Sheng Wanyu went down just like that. He had also come into contact with the cold air just now and could clearly feel that it contained a shocking amount of power. Although Sheng Wanyu was a high god, going down like that was no different from courting death. Even if she had that strange god realm, she would not be able to save herself. With that thought, the accumulated resentment in Mao Yao's heart finally eased. Since this matter is over, we'll take our leave, Mao Yao said. Actually, he wanted to stay here and continue watching the show. After all, he had suffered so much in Sheng Wanyu. Only by watching her suffer enough torture could he vent the hatred in his heart. Unfortunately, he was in too much of a sorry state right now. He did not want to stay here for even a second longer. Elder Bo Yan and the others were all thinking about Chu Luiyue. How could they care about him? Senior Mao Yao, take care. You've already walked the path, so we won't send you off. Elder Bo Yan's tone was not polite. Mao Yao's expression changed slightly, but he still endured it. Light flashed on its body, and in the next moment, it changed into a piece of purplish gold scale armor. The academy elders opened the barrier and could not wait to send this god of plague away. The moment the scale armor left, the academy's barrier closed again. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1526. The scale flew back, and Mao Yao, who was standing outside the barrier, suddenly came back to his senses. He moved his body and coughed twice. The few juniors beside him hurriedly came over nervously and asked worriedly. It was a pity that these words only made Mao Yao recall his previous miserable appearance. They saw everything. Mao Yao was very frustrated, and his expression was naturally not any better. Soon, those people sensed that he was in a bad mood and quieted down timidly, not daring to say anything else. The atmosphere was cold and silent, as if it had frozen. The few of them secretly looked at each other and saw regret in each other's eyes. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have come this time. I thought that I would be able to show my face in front of Mao Yao, but who knew that it would end up like this? Mao Yao had always cared about his face the most. Now that they had seen what had happened today, they were afraid that he would bear a grudge against them as well. In the future, who knew how he would be taken care of? How could Mao Yao not be vexed in his heart? After knowing that Sheng Wanjing was still alive, he was filled with anger and only wanted to take revenge on Sheng Wanjing. Bringing these people along was purely for the sake of setting up a battle formation. In terms of strength, these people combined were not as strong as him. But now, he had lost all his face. Not only did they not help him, but his ridiculous and sorry state was also seen by them. If he had known earlier, he would not have done anything unnecessary. Mao Yao took a deep breath. Because his real body was injured, his aura was much weaker than when he first came. Let's go, Mao Yao ordered and turned to leave. The few people behind him did not dare to object and immediately lowered their heads and followed carefully. The group of figures quickly disappeared outside the barrier. However, at this moment, no one cared about them. Everyone's attention was on the Thousand Wine Mountain. No matter how slow they would realize that something was wrong with the Thousand Wine Mountain. Other than those who are responsible for guarding the Academy's barrier, summon all the remaining elders. Elder Bo Yan instructed Elder Hua Feng. Elder Hua Feng nodded with a solemn expression, and his figure quickly disappeared on the spot. Elder Bo Yan pondered for a moment and said, "By the way, Ouyang, go and invite those people over." Elder Ouyang was shocked and hesitated. Really? Those few people would not easily come out of seclusion. If they were invited to come out, then, it meant that the situation must have become so serious that it was difficult to deal with. The elders were fine, but if the students saw it, they would feel uneasy and worried. At that time, if the people's hearts became unstable, Elder Bo Yen nodded his head. I have to hurry. He knew what Elder Ouyang was worried about. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he wouldn't have wanted to do this. Now it's really, you is down there. No matter what, we have to bring her back safely. Elder Bo Yen sighed softly, but he was very determined. Hearing this, Elder Ouyang seemed to be touched by something and immediately agreed. Good. I'll go right now. The elders quickly got to work. Elder Wanzheng looked at the rapidly gathering figures, but the uneasiness in his heart could not be dispelled. He clenched his fists and frowned. If only the dean was still here, if he was here, they would definitely be more confident. After all, he had always been the one looking after the spring. Now that something had happened, there was no one more suitable than him to take action. Elder Bo Yen closed his eyes and sighed softly. How could he not want this to happen? But after the dean left back then, there was no news for a few years. Even now, Yu had returned, but there was still no news from him. If he did not have a way to confirm that the dean was still alive, but waiting like this was not a solution. If the spring completely exploded? Chaotic thoughts kept flashing through his mind, causing Elder Bo Yen to feel a little vexed. Suddenly, a figure flew past his eyes. His heart leaped to his throat. Rong Xiao. What are you doing? Rong Xiao did not answer. He stood right above Thousand Wine Mountain. The wind blew the corner of his clothes, outlining the man's tall figure. His clothes fluttered, and the surroundings were silent. He lowered his eyes slightly and looked down. The sharp sword chi had already enveloped the surroundings of Thousand Wine Mountain. But the cold air was pressing, and some places on the mountain peak were already covered with thick white frost. And it was slowly but steadily spreading to the surroundings. Those sword chi would not be able to last for long. Rong Xiao's expression was cold, and his noble and devilish face was cold and disdainful. In the depths of his deep phoenix eyes, one side burned with golden flames, while the other side surged with endless black light. In just an instant, he closed his eyes. Everything in front of him was completely covered up. The next moment, a vast and majestic aura suddenly erupted from his body. In an instant, countless golden sparks fell from the sky. In just a short while, it had completely covered Thousand Wine Mountain. The scene inside was now completely blocked off, and outsiders could no longer peek in the slightest. Rong Xiao's body was also surrounded by a layer of golden barrier. His figure was covered. The golden light flickered, and even the outline of his figure could no longer be seen clearly. Rong Xiao opened his eyes and raised his hand. The void in front of him suddenly split open silently. An item flew out quickly. Bang! Rong Xiao grabbed the item in his hand. It was a scroll. His wrist shook lightly, and the scroll opened. At the top, there were 3 big golden words, clear and bright. Pantheon Record. And at this moment, somewhere on the scroll, a name was faintly discernible. Digression. Kawen is so uncomfortable woo tomorrow at 12:00. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1527. That name seemed to have been forcefully erased before, but now, the original words were gradually appearing. The word "you" almost flew out from the back of the paper. Now that she had regained her high god realm, she had recalled it. Then, her name would naturally appear on the Pantheon record again. But the position of her surname was still a blur. Rong Xiao raised his hand, and a cluster of golden flames suddenly burned on his fingertip. As he got closer, the bright light illuminated the name on it. As long as he got closer, he could erase that name again. He hesitated for a moment, but finally stopped his actions. He put away the scroll and looked at Thousand Wine Mountain with a heavy gaze. This time, you have to keep your word. He would never allow the same thing to happen a second time. Time passed bit by bit, and in the blink of an eye, it was night. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the dark night sky was quiet. The night that was as clear as water shrouded everything in a hazy fog, as if it was covered with a layer of coldness. From afar, only the outside of Thousand Wine Mountain was shining brightly. However, everyone knew that behind that dazzling light, there was great danger. Outside Thousand Wine Mountain, from the ground to the air, the Academy elders had already surrounded it and were waiting. Seeing such a scene, most of the students knew that the danger this time was not small even if they did not know what had happened. The vast Qingming Square was completely silent. The atmosphere was so cold that it seemed to be frozen. Elder Bo Yen looked down again. Separated by the layer of golden barrier set up by Rong Xiu, it was almost impossible for them to see the situation inside from the outside. However, from the beginning until now, there was not even the slightest energy fluctuation coming from inside. This caused the elders to become even more worried. Let the students go back first. Elder Hua Feng said in a low voice. Who knows how long it will take for her to come out this time. It's not good to keep everyone waiting here. Not to mention that they could not be of any help, with so many people gathered together, it was easy to feel uneasy. Elder Bo Yen thought for a moment and nodded. Then let them go back to their own residences first. Also, send an elder to watch over them secretly. At a time like this, they really could not afford to make the slightest mistake. Elder Hua Feng nodded and quickly went to do it. Not long after, the students were evacuated by several elders and returned to their respective rooms. Even though there were some people who wanted to continue staying here, they couldn't dissuade the academy and eventually left obediently. Elder Bo Yen. A low and worried voice came from the side. Elder Bo Yen turned his head to look. Senior Shengwan. What's going on with the Thousand Wine Mountain Spring? Shengwan Jing had wanted to ask this question for a long time. Previously, when he was still a soul residing in the sword, he had followed Chu Luiyue to the Myriad Wine Mountain several times. He knew that there was a secret hidden in the Thousand Wine Mountain Spring, and it seemed to involve a lot of people. Otherwise, Elder Bo Yen and the others would not be so nervous. After seeing the rapidly spreading white frost during the day, he was even more certain of his guess. Now, Yu had already gone in for a long time, but there was still no movement. Every time he thought of the white frost condensing and the destruction of life on Thousand Wine Mountain, he felt a chill run down his spine. Elder Bo Yen wanted to say something but hesitated. This matter couldn't be explained clearly in a sentence or two. Moreover, there were many inside stories that they weren't completely clear about. They really didn't know how to explain it to Shengwan Jing. But seeing Shengwan Jing's worried face, Elder Bo Yen couldn't bear it. After deliberating for a long time, he picked a part and explained it simply. There are no outsiders here now, and you're Yu's elder, so we won't hide some things from you. Actually, this Thousand Wine Mountain has existed since the Academy was first established. Ever since then, the 10,000 Wines Mountain had become a special existence in the Academy. The successive deans, as well as the weapon refinement masters and elders, will take special care of it. Needless to say, the deans will specially strengthen the barrier of Thousand Wine Mountain every year. And when the elders are refining weapons, as long as the conditions permit, they will try their best to lure Tianlei into the spring. Shengwan Jing frowned. It has been like this for so many years. Elder Bo Yen nodded. Many people in the academy know about this. Shengwan Jing was even more surprised and didn't speak for a long time. He was also a weapon refinement master, so he naturally knew how much energy the Tianlei that was triggered by weapon refinement contained and how big of a commotion it would cause. Ordinary beginner, intermediate, and even advanced yuan tools wouldn't attract Tianlei when they were being forged. But many little things made a mickle. After 10,000 years, how many yuan tools would so many weapon refinement masters forge? The amount of Tianlei attracted would probably be uncountable. And all of this actually fell into the small spring of Thousand Wine Mountain. Not to mention, a school like Lingshao College was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. If a weapon refinement king or even a weapon refinement venerable made a move, it would be even more terrifying. It was really abnormal that Thousand Wine Mountain hadn't been reduced to flat ground until now. Just how much power of heavenly lightning had accumulated in the spring? And how did it contain such terrifying power? Shengguan Jing didn't dare to think about it. As if seeing through Shengguan Jing's thoughts, Elder Bo Yen comforted him. Actually, nothing has happened to the spring all these years. Moreover, everyone and Rong Xiu are here now. You will definitely be able to return safely. Shengguan Jing knew that he was just comforting him. In fact, when the incident happened, he had also seen Elder Bo Yen and the others panicked and shocked expressions. They weren't willing to see this happen. Moreover, that girl was the one who insisted on going down. They couldn't blame others. He sighed in his heart. The only thing he could do now was to wait patiently. Oh right, there's one more thing. Shengguan Jing was silent for a moment, as if he was hesitating whether to speak. Senior Shengguan, please speak your mind. Elder Bo Yen said. After pausing for a moment, Shengguan Jing took a deep breath and looked up at him. You, was a student of Lingshao College in the past. Elder Bo Yen was stunned. You don't know about this? Shengguan Jing smiled bitterly. I just woke up from the primordial north. How would I know about this? Elder Bo Yen thought about it and agreed. Previously, he thought that Yu had always been so presumptuous because she had Shengguan Jing as her backing. Now, it seemed that he was wrong. He pondered for a moment before saying, actually, we're not very clear about this matter now. A few years ago, when she came to the academy, she was also 17 or 18 years old. Although her appearance is very similar to now, there are still some slight differences. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1528. In short, from the looks of it, they were definitely two different people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been unable to recognize her after such a long time. Even when they saw her true appearance in Fangzhou City, they were suspicious but did not dare to confirm their guess in the end. Looks could be changed, but how could one fake their age? During the entrance test, they would test the students together. The age measured at that time was definitely real. If she didn't summon the godly realm just now, we wouldn't dare to confirm that she really came back. As Elder Bo Yen spoke, he raised his hand and pointed at the Donghuang Bell Tower. At this time, the string of names on the green cloud roll had all been hidden. The Donghuang Bell Tower once again returned to its usual dark, solemn, and dignified appearance. I believe you saw it just now. The name that was deliberately erased from the green cloud roll was hers. Of course, Shengguan Jing saw it. It was hard not to notice it with such a big commotion. Shengguan Jing fell into deep thought. In the past, he had discovered that Yu seemed to have come to the godly ruins world. But at that time, he didn't pay much attention to it. It was only later when she confirmed that she had lost part of her memory that he realized that things seemed to be more complicated than he had expected. But he never thought that she was actually, hearing Elder Bo Yan's words, that child seemed to have already become a high god when she came here a few years ago. She didn't stay in the academy for long. Later on, she said that she wanted to go home, but for some reason, she never came back. Until this time. Elder Bo Yen sighed. Although Yu was naughty, most of the elders in the academy liked her very much. It could even be said that they doted on her. She was talented and quick-witted. No matter how big a mistake she made, the elders couldn't bear to punish her severely. Otherwise, someone like Elder Meng wouldn't have been willing to help her guard the godly realm for so many years. Who knew that after waiting for so long, she came back with another identity in the end? If it wasn't for Mao Yao bringing people to cause trouble this time, who knew when they would find out about this? And at that time, she and Rongxiu seemed to have already discussed marriage. Elder Bo Yan's voice was much softer. Speaking of this, he couldn't help but look up at Rongxiu. They all thought that it wouldn't be long before the news of the two's marriage. Who knew, when it came to grief, there was probably no one who felt more pain than Rongxiu. Shengguan Jing was silent. He was basically certain that after Yu returned from Lingshao College, she encountered Shengguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing's betrayal and was reborn from the dead. But at that time, how could she have regressed from a high god to a stage 9 warrior? Furthermore, he had completely lost all his memories of the Divine Ruins world. Anyhow, we're glad to have her back now. If the headmaster knows. If the principal knew that she had brought such a huge disaster to the academy, I'm afraid he would sever his relationship with her. Before Elder Bo Yen could finish his words, a sinister and cold voice suddenly sounded by his ear. Everyone was shocked and turned around to look. In the sky far away, there were two figures rapidly approaching. In the blink of an eye, they were already outside the boundary of the academy. The person at the front was an old man in a gray robe. His hair was white and his body was slightly hunched. His triangular eyes flickered with a cold luster. He didn't look angry, but his might was intimidating. Behind him was a young man. He looked to be in his early 20s. He was wearing an indigo brocade robe with a few golden patterns embroidered on the cuffs, faintly exuding a noble aura. Under the moonlight, his long robe with wide sleeves made him look graceful. From afar, he looked like an elegant ink painting. The moonlight breeze blew up his long hair, and a trace of demonic red at the tip of his tail was exceptionally strong and bright. It was like a sharp carving knife that was about to tear this tranquil, elegant, and virtuous painting. Yi Wenzhua. Why did he suddenly come back? When Elder Bo Yen and the others saw the faces of the two people clearly, they were all shocked. Shengguan Jing asked curiously. Who is Yi Wenzhua? Elder Bo Yen pursed his lips. Lingshao College's vice-headmaster. Shengguan Jing was a little stunned. Lingshao College had always been famous in the Divine Ruins world. Back then, when he was training in the Divine Ruins world, although he didn't officially interact with them, he still had some understanding of them. Since 10,000 years ago, Lingshao College had always only had one headmaster. He had never heard of any vice-headmaster. What was going on? But when he turned his gaze and saw the young man behind him, his expression changed slightly. Because that person was Jun Jiuqing. Yi Wenzhua waved his sleeve, and the school's barrier quickly opened. He and Jun Jiuqing entered in a flash. The first thing he did was look at Wan Jiushan. His already cold expression became even gloomier. Jun Jiuqing, who was standing behind him, frowned slightly. When his gaze swept past the golden light surrounding the Rongxiu in mid-air, a hint of killing intent vaguely appeared. But this kind of emotion was quickly restrained by him. Bo Yen, the headmaster, and I have only left for a period of time, and this is how you guard the school. Yi Wenzhua stopped in his tracks and looked straight at Elder Bo Yen, scolding him right to his face. Do you want to see the school destroyed before you're satisfied? His voice was stern, and he didn't leave any face for Elder Bo Yen. The surroundings immediately quieted down. The elders looked at each other. He had just returned, and he was looking for trouble. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1529. No matter what, Elder Bo Yen was still an important person in Lingxiao College. Since the dean was not around, he had been handling the matters of the college for the past few years. Even if he did not contribute, he had worked hard. Furthermore, before this, he had been doing his job well. Yi Wenzhua did not ask anything and just scolded him harshly. It was too much. Elder Bo Yen, on the other hand, seemed to have expected this scene and his expression was calm. He bowed politely and said unhurriedly, "I'm sorry. We are all very happy that Vice Dean is back. Bo Yen is not capable enough and could not handle these matters well. I have disappointed you." Although he said that, his expression was neither servile nor overbearing, as if he was not panicked by Yi Wen's scolding. "But don't worry, we have already stabilized the situation and are trying our best to solve the problem. We will not let this matter escalate." Yi Wenzhua hated seeing him like this. He was just an ordinary elder in the college, but he seemed to have a higher status than Vice Dean. "Easy for you to say." Yi Wenzhua sneered. Thousand Wine Mountain has never had such a situation in all these years. How did it become like this? He took a step forward and approached Elder Bo Yen, his voice cold. "It's fine if it's someone else, but Bo Yen, don't tell me you don't know how serious this matter is." Elder Bo Yan's eyes drooped, but his attitude remained the same. "Of course Bo Yen knows, so I do not dare to slack off or shirk my responsibility. After this matter is over, Bo Yen will accept any punishment." What he meant was that everyone was still busy solving the problem and it was not the time to find out who was right and who was wrong. Yi Wenzhua was annoyed by his rebuttal. What else is there to say? The cold air in the spring has already leaked out. The situation is urgent, we must immediately activate the Sky Shuttle Array. Seal Thousand Wine Mountain. The moment he said that, everyone was shocked. Even Jun Jiu Qing's eyes flashed with shock. "You must not." Hearing this, Elder Bo Yan's expression changed. Is still in the spring. Once the array is activated, she will be suppressed as well. The Sky Shuttle Array was a top-grade Xian array and was extremely powerful. At that time, she would not be able to come out. Look at the situation now. How could I care about that? Yi Wenzhua seemed very impatient. Bo Yen, get this straight. Is a student more important than the entire Lingxiao College? Before I came here, I've already done some research on Lingxiao College. Shengguan Yu was the girl from back then. She was as good at causing trouble as always. She had caused so much trouble in the past, but with the dean's protection, no one could do anything to her. But this time, she had made a huge mistake. As Yi Wenzhua spoke, he pointed at the 10,000 Wine Mountain. How did her red-tailed red phoenix break through to become a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? I don't need to tell you, you know what's going on, right? Now that she has gone in with a guilty conscience, what are you guys still hesitating for? If you make a mistake, you have to accept the punishment. Elder Bo Yen clenched his teeth and tried his best to remain calm. Vice Principal, whether Yu's crimson gold celestial phoenix is related to the spring is still unclear. How can we casually deduce? Besides, even if that was the case, it wasn't as if there were no other solutions. After all, she is the dean's student, the descendant of Senior Shengguan, and the princess consort of Yuntian Tower. How can we take her life so easily? You haven't been in the school these few years, so you don't know a lot of things here. I don't dare to say anything else, but if the dean was here today, he would definitely agree to this. Yi Wenzhua suddenly laughed coldly. Bo Yen, whose blessing do you think the dean's disappearance was due to? Digression, regarding Yi Wenzhua's name and identity, he had mentioned it once before, but he forgot the details in February, so he used this time as the basis. Yesterday, Ka and Ka couldn't sleep, but today, everything is going smoothly happy. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1530. Elder Bo Yan's chest tightened as a look of struggle surfaced in his eyes. Many of the surrounding elders frowned as they looked over in bewilderment. What? From Ewen's words, could it be that the principal's departure that year was really related to that lass? Vice Principal, this matter has yet to be concluded and everything is still a guess. You don't have any evidence and I'm afraid it's not very appropriate for you to make such a conclusion. Elder Bo Yan slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. Once these words are spread out, not only will yours reputation be tarnished, even the principal's reputation will be implicated. So, please be careful with your words. Evidence. Ewen's narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed, obviously disagreeing with his words. What evidence is there for such an obvious matter? That year before that lass came, the academy had always been fine. But ever since she had arrived, the entire academy had been thrown into a complete mess. How many times did the principal clean up the mess for her behind her back? In the end, even when she was about to leave, she still refused to stop. If this matter really has nothing to do with her, then how do you explain that after she left the academy, the principal also disappeared? These few years, there was no news of her at all, even the principal was the same. He didn't even send back a single letter in between. He had always regarded the academy with great importance, and if it wasn't for someone or something that he cared more about, why would he leave just like that and not return for so many years? And that Sheng Wanyu was his most beloved disciple. As Ewen's said, he suddenly leaned over slightly and leaned in closer as he stared at Elder Bo Yan, his voice lowered very low. Moreover, when he handed the academy over to you, did he really not tell you anything? Ewen's words were said with a hint of gritting his teeth. Because at that time, he was also in the academy. But the principal had directly passed over him, the vice principal, to Elder Bo Yan. This was simply a slap to his face in public. It was also because of this matter that Ewen's was greatly agitated and directly left the academy. Furthermore, in the few years after that, he did not care about the academy's matters at all. In any case, he did not have the authority to manage the academy, so why should he worry? If he hadn't heard that Lingshao College was in trouble one after another and that Jun Zhiqing had invited him back, he wouldn't have been willing to come back. The veins on the back of Elder Bo Yan's hand bulged, but his face remained calm. He said indifferently, "The dean only told me to do my best to take care of the academy." He didn't say anything else. Ewen's was filled with disdain and disbelief. He leaned back and took 2 steps back, distancing himself from Elder Bo Yan. He brushed his clothes as if to flick away something dirty. Elder Bo Yan pretended not to see anything. Since he has said so, then you should do the same. If you don't activate the Sky Shuttle Array, could it be that you can use other methods to completely solve the problem of Myriad Wine Mountain? Ewen's laughed coldly, his eyes filled with mockery. Not to mention Bo Yan, even if all the elders in the academy joined hands, they would not be able to deal with this situation. If the principal were to return, there might still be a glimmer of hope. But who knew where he was now? Since this happened while we were taking care of the academy, we should be fully responsible. If anything happens, Bo Yan will bear the responsibility. Elder Bo Yan's temper had always been gentle and calm, but only those who knew him well knew that he was actually very stubborn. If not, the dean would not have placed the entire academy in his hands. Ewen's didn't expect that Elder Bo Yan would still dare to be so stubborn at this time. That depends on whether you can bear the responsibility. If he can't bear the responsibility alone, then, what if I join in? Elder Meng suddenly spoke up from the side. Ewen's was shocked. Elder Meng. Elder Meng's seniority was very high, and his position in the academy was also extraordinary. Even he had to respectfully greet him as Elder Meng. So at this time, although Yi Wenzuo was furious, he didn't dare to confront Elder Meng directly. Elder Meng, are you going to let them do whatever they want? Just for that girl, hey? Elder Meng didn't seem to have the patience to listen to him, and shrugged with a smile. I even helped that girl guard the God Realm for several years. Because of that, I haven't left Mount Pingmin for many years. Wenzuo, according to what you said, isn't that even more outrageous? Yi Wenzuo was speechless. He could reprimand Elder Bo Yen, but he couldn't contradict Elder Meng. Anyway, you didn't pay much attention to the academy these few years, so you might as well let it go and let them deal with it themselves. Although Elder Meng was smiling, his words were not polite at all. Yi Wenzuo's face darkened, but he could only suppress his anger. Yes. Just pamper that person as much as you want. When things get out of hand, let's see if they can still be so righteous. The surroundings quieted down again. The already tense atmosphere became even colder because of Yi Wenzuo's return. Jun Juqing glanced at Wan Jiushan, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Then, he looked up at Rong Xiu, who was in midair. At this moment, the golden barrier around Rong Xiu had faded, and his expression was calm and indifferent. Jun Juqing spoke with his mind. A soft voice like that of a mosquito floated into Rong Xiu's ears. Is this how you protect her? Upon hearing that, Rong Xiu finally retracted his gaze and looked over. The two men's eyes met, and for a moment, there seemed to be sparks flying. Murderous intent overflowed. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. Jun Juqing's thin lips curled into a cold smile. Since then, you haven't improved at all. I thought that with the previous experience, you would definitely learn a lesson. But now, it seems that I have overestimated you. Even he knew that he had done everything possible to stop her from coming back. For this reason, he even took Chu Ning away and placed him at a place thousands of miles away from Lingxiao College. He didn't want her to come here again. Unfortunately, not only did she come back, but she also remembered everything that had happened in the past. The return of the divine realm was the best proof. As Jun Juqing spoke, he glanced down coldly. Wan Jiushan was going to riot, that golden barrier wouldn't be able to hold on for long. And Chu Luyue, who was in the middle of it, was the first to bear the brunt. If something happened this time, he didn't believe that Rong Xiu would still have the ability to help her set up her rebirth. These words were very harsh. Jun Juqing thought that Rong Xiu would fly into a rage. However, he didn't. He only paused for a moment, as if recalling his words. Then, he smiled slightly. His clear and low voice clearly fell into Jun Juqing's ears. She's my woman. I'll accompany her no matter what she wants to do. At most, life and death reincarnation. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1531. When she wanted to kill someone, he helped her pass the knife. When she wanted to take revenge, he helped her plan. When she wanted to come back, he had wanted to stop her, but he could not win against her faint smile and finally compromised. She had experienced too much along the way. He had seen it all and his heart ached. Back then, he had risked half his life just to let her return safely. If she insisted, she would make the same choice. Then, he would do the same. Anyway, he still had half his life to give to her. Rong Xiu's tone was light and he said it calmly and matter-of-factly. Jun Juqing frowned. This declaration of sovereignty made him very uncomfortable. But what made it even harder for him to accept was that even when Rong Xiu made such a choice, he was always full of confidence. He was just relying on the fact that she had him in her heart. Whether it was in the past or now, he was always a step too late. One step too late would be a lifelong regret. Because he knew her too well. Once he had decided on someone, he would never go back on his words or change his mind. If she started over, she would still make the same choice. She still chose Rongxiu. She still chose to enter the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain. Juqing, Juqing. Yiwen's voice pulled Jun Juqing back from his thoughts. He came back to his senses. Master. What are you thinking about? Yiwen's looked at him strangely. During this period of time, Jun Juqing would be in a daze from time to time. He did not know what he was thinking about. He had asked him a few times, but he did not say much. Jun Juqing lowered his head respectfully. Nothing. I'm just thinking that such a situation has never happened in Thousand Wine Mountain. This time, it has suddenly erupted. I'm afraid it won't be that easy to suppress it. Yiwen's expression recovered a little. That's what I meant too. You have to know that the more time we delay, the more dangerous it will be. Unfortunately, he no longer had much authority in Lingxiao College. Elder Bo Yan and the others seemed to be respectful to him, but in fact, they did not fear him at all. Elder Meng, needless to say, was obviously on the opposite side. Under such circumstances, they were outnumbered and could only watch from the sidelines. Elder Bo Yan and the others stared at Wan Zhishan attentively, as if they did not care about the conversation between the master and disciple. The fire in Yiwen's heart surged again. He took a few deep breaths and suppressed it with great difficulty. Just watch. It just so happens that you've recently become a high god and have a divine domain. I have taught you many times that you must not be arrogant and complacent. He frowned and said meaningfully, don't be like some people who think they are invincible just because they have some small achievements. In the end, they will suffer a great loss. Jun Juqing gently nodded. His eyelids drooped slightly, concealing the emotions in his eyes. At the bottom of the Thousand Wine Mountain Spring, Chu Luiyue was using Scarlet Heaven's sword to chisel away at the rocks at the bottom of the spring. Compared to the first time he came in, a lot had changed. The spring water turned from gentle to icy cold, and it was bone-piercing. Even Chu Luiyue, who had become a high god, found it difficult to deal with it. After staying here for a long time, her limbs began to turn numb and cold, and her movements became sluggish. The most terrifying thing was that this cold air seemed to be gradually freezing the origin power in her body. Chu Luiyue could not remember how long she had been here, but she could clearly feel that the origin power surging in her limbs and bones seemed to be slowing down. Clang! Clang! Chu Luiyue gritted her teeth. She circulated the origin power in her body, trying her best to warm up her body as she swung Scarlet Heaven's sword with all her might. Unfortunately, the rocks at the bottom of the spring were very hard. She tried countless times, but only managed to leave a few shallow marks on them. Actually, this was already very shocking. After all, so many Tianlei had landed here, and the bottom was still smooth and flat. Scarlet Heaven's sword was a venerable one divine weapon, and Chu Luiyue's current strength was much stronger than before. Only then did she manage to leave a few marks on the surface. Otherwise, she would not have been able to leave a single mark. Phew! At a certain moment, Chu Luiyue finally stopped and rubbed her sore arms. With her current strength, it was obvious how difficult it was for her to reach this point. The rock at the bottom was still unmoved. Chu Luiyue frowned. This thing was indeed strange. If she wanted to carve a ceiling profound formation on it, she did not know how long she would have to wait. She was afraid that she would have to think of another way. Chu Luiyue raised her head and looked at the frozen layer of ice on the surface of the water. Probably because of the obstruction of the flames, the hole in the center of the ice layer that Chu Luiyue had opened had not been frozen again until now. However, the pattern that had appeared on it before was still clearly visible. Although it was not completely drawn, she could still roughly see it. Suddenly, the surrounding water waves slowly surged. Especially on the surface of the water, a small whirlpool actually appeared. There were small pieces of ice left behind when Chu Luiyue broke the ice layer, and at this moment, they were all silently gathering. Chu Luiyue frowned. Then, she saw that the patterns carved on the thick layer of ice suddenly moved along with the whirlpool. They fell from the layer of ice and condensed again under the ice. 1 line, 2 lines. Soon, those lines had been combined again. It seemed that they were going to form that strange pattern again. Dong dong. A dull knocking sound suddenly came from below her feet. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked and immediately looked down. She saw that the hard and thick rock at the bottom suddenly vibrated with the sound. It seemed that something was about to break out from it. Digression. Tomorrow at 12:00 mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1532. Chu Luiyue's eyes were fixed on it, and her heart was beating violently. Thump thump. The knocking sound was hurried and powerful, and it seemed to contain some kind of strange rhythm. The blood in Chu Luiyue's eardrums rumbled, and she gradually felt a stinging pain. Clearly, there seemed to be someone holding an axe and frantically knocking on her head, trying to break free from it. The blood in her body surged, and the pain became more and more intense. Screech. Suddenly, a clear screech was heard. Chu Luiyue was startled, and she finally regained her senses. Her body trembled slightly, and the scene just now flashed through her mind. Only then did she realize that she was almost bewitched by the strange knocking sound. Just a little bit more, Chu Luiyue's brows were tightly knitted, and her heart was still palpitating. Her mind had always been very firm, and she was rarely bewitched by such means. But just now, in just a short while, she almost fell into this trap. This was enough to show how strong the other party was. If Dumpling hadn't woken her up in time, what would have happened? She really couldn't guess. Chu Luiyue held her breath, and calmed her frantic heartbeat. Thump thump. Listening to it again, that sound was no different from the usual knocking sound. Chu Luiyue no longer felt flustered and anxious. Crack. Suddenly, a slight cracking sound was heard. Chu Luiyue thought to herself, "Oh no." She focused her eyes and saw that there was indeed a crack on the rock at the bottom. The crack was only an inch long, and it was very shallow and thin. However, this scene made Chu Luiyue's heart tremble in fear. A gust of cold air quickly spread from it. This cold air instantly enveloped Chu Luiyue's entire body. She couldn't help but shiver, and then she immediately activated the force in her body. A cluster of reddish-gold flames quickly gushed out from her palm, and instantly covered her whole body. When the flames isolated the surrounding cold air, Chu Luiyue looked down again. A thin layer of frost had already condensed on the crack. But the frost was actually blood red. It looked like fine and beautiful rubies, but also like frozen blood beads. It was gorgeous, but also strange. Soon, a second crack appeared next to it. It was also covered with blood-red frost. A faint smell of blood spread from it. Because the water in the spring was not real water, but pure liquid condensed from the energy of heaven and earth, Chu Luiyue could breathe and move normally in it. The smell of blood wafted to her nose just like that. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. I can't let this thing break. This thought flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. She clenched her teeth, with both hands, and slashed the rock. For a moment, blood frost. But the next moment, those small beads of the blood, they returned to their original positions. Crack, an ear-piercing scraping sound was heard. The Scarlet Heaven sword made a long mark on the rock. Unfortunately, this mark was much fainter than the crack that appeared from the inside of the rock. Chu Luiyue clenched her teeth. If she wanted to stop the thing inside from coming out, she had to rely on a strong force to suppress it from the outside. This was also why the Academy elders had been constantly drawing Tianlei into it for so many years. Unfortunately, the power of Tianlei in the spring had been swallowed by Dumpling, which led to today's situation. Now, if she wanted to save it, the only way was to engrave a Xian formation on this rock and suppress it by force. However, with her current strength, it would be very difficult for her to cast the Xian formation. So she wanted to use the Scarlet Heaven Sword to forcibly engrave a Xian formation on it. Unfortunately, a treasure as noble as the Scarlet Heaven Sword was actually repeatedly thwarted by this stone. Now, she had not even engraved a quarter of the Xian formation, and the rock had already cracked from the inside. At this moment, time seemed to become extremely unbearable. More and more cracks appeared on the rock, and every crack was covered with that strange blood-colored frost. Gradually, it formed that familiar pattern. It was exactly the same as the one that appeared on the ice surface previously. Chu Luyue could no longer remember how many times she had swung her sword. Every time, she used all her strength. Clang! Finally, the sword tip touched the rock, and the force rebounded. The sword shook, and the web between her thumb and index finger silently split open. Split open. Dark red blood flowed out, but before it could drip, it had already frozen. Not long after, Chu Liyue's hands were covered with a thin layer of frost. The cold air quickly entered her body from her wound and started to corrode her limbs and bones. Chu Liyue's pupils shrank. She had a bad feeling and wanted to retreat immediately. But it was too late. It was as if a sharp claw had forcefully entered her body with frightening speed and agility. Moreover, it had begun to pull at every single yuan meridian in her body with all its might. Intense pain came from all over her body. The pure gold flames around her started to extinguish at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, Chu Liyue's body was completely immersed in the bone-chilling spring water. The blood-colored frost on her hands had already started to spread to the surroundings. Not long after, her arms, shoulders, and even neck were covered with a layer of frost. Chu Liyue raised her hand with difficulty, wanting to wave the scarlet cloud sword. But at this moment, her hands seemed to be out of her control and became extremely stiff. At a certain moment, her hands loosened weakly. The scarlet cloud sword fell silently, drawing a shallow ripple in the spring water before finally landing on the rock at the bottom. The cold air surged up, and the blood-colored frost completely froze the scarlet cloud sword. Chu Liyue felt that her face was already ice-cold. She knew that the cold air had already spread to her face. That familiar yet unfamiliar aura made her heart tremble slightly. Unfortunately, this power was too strong. Any resistance or struggle she made was futile and pale. A thick layer of blood color gradually spread out in the clear and deep spring water. It was not blood that had spread out, but a blood-colored frost that was gradually gathering from the deepest part. Chu Liyue's consciousness gradually became blurry. The cold air overflowed and wrapped around her heavily. Her eyelids started to become extremely heavy. So cold, so sleepy, within the mouth of the spring, everything was quiet and still. It was as if all sound had been swallowed up. The silence was terrifying. Waves surged between the ripples of the water. Chu Liyue's body was completely covered by the blood-colored frost. At a glance, it looked like a sculpture that had been meticulously carved out of sparkling and translucent blood jade. Crack. The final crack had finally appeared. A complete pattern appeared on the rock. In the next moment, a terrifying cold air suddenly erupted like a torrential flood. Boom! Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1533. Rumble. This sound was earth-shattering. The entire Thousand Wine Mountain shook violently. For a moment, the mountain rocks rolled down, and the wind howled. The countless sword chi that originally surrounded the thousand wine mountains suddenly dissipated. Bang! 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 Even the layer of golden barrier that enveloped the outside shattered. Instantly, it transformed into countless golden light spots and was annihilated in the black night sky. The violent energy spread out in all directions. This terrifying movement immediately caused the expressions of the people waiting outside the thousand wine mountain to change. Not good. That thing can't be suppressed anymore. Elder Bo Yen exclaimed in shock. A moment later, everyone saw a crimson stream of water suddenly rush out from the peak of Myriad Wine Mountain, drawing a streak of extremely intense color in the night as it soared into the sky. From afar, it looked like a volcanic eruption. However, the difference was that the lava was wrapped in heat waves, while the spring water was filled with dense cold air that was bone-chilling. The spring water gushed out and then rushed in all directions. Wherever it passed, a large patch of blood-colored frost would appear. The entire Thousand Wine Mountain was instantly covered in a layer of shocking crimson red. Even more terrifying was that it was still spreading outside. Some of the nearby mountains were already affected. Bo Yen. Is this what you wanted to see? Yi Wen's suddenly attacked and questioned sternly. Elder Bo Yen clenched his teeth. Everyone, listen to my order. Work together to seal the Thousand Wine Mountain. As soon as he finished speaking, several elders made their moves in unison. Several streaks of divine power of different colors gathered from all directions and rushed toward the sky above the Thousand Wine Mountain. However, before these divine power could condense, it was blocked by the surging cold air. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. Those who could stand here were at least high gods, and their strength was not ordinary. However, facing the cold air head-on, they were at a disadvantage in an instant. Soon, the huge Thousand Wine Mountain was almost completely covered in blood-colored frost. Moreover, the undulating mountain peaks at the side were also beginning to be affected. Everywhere it passed, blood spread, ice covered, and life dissipated. Some trees and flowers that were originally lush withered and froze in the blink of an eye. Yi Wen's sneered. I said earlier that the sky shuttle array must be activated, but you didn't listen. What should we do now? Anyone could see that if this evil cold air was allowed to spread, it wouldn't be long before the entire academy would be swallowed up. Bo Yen, if Lingxiao College is really destroyed by your hands, even if you die 100 times, it won't be enough to compensate. That's all I have to say. As for what to do, you decide for yourselves. In any case, he was not the dean, and the management power was not in his hands. Whether Lingxiao College lived or died, it had nothing to do with him. Elder Bo Yen stared at the Thousand Wine Mountain that was covered in frost. His heart was in a mess. Originally, he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart, but now, since it had already happened, if he didn't take action in time, he was afraid that it would really be like what Yi Wen's said and implicate the entire academy. The most important thing was that the power of this thing had far exceeded his previous expectations. In reality, although Elder Bo Yen and the rest knew that there was a huge and dangerous secret hidden under the spring, they didn't know exactly what it was. For thousands of years, the successive deans and elders of Lingxiao College would carefully and conscientiously guard the Thousand Wine Mountain. This had already become a tradition and a tacit rule. Because it had almost never revealed any abnormalities, they didn't think too much about it and just treated it as part of their duties. However, none of them had expected such a terrifying power to be hidden beneath the ground. If they didn't activate the Sky Shuttle Array, they really wouldn't be able to deal with this situation. But Yu was still in there. Elder Bo Yen clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging. He was in a dilemma. In the next moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked at Elder Meng with a last glimmer of hope. Elder Meng, do you have a way? He didn't finish his sentence. When he saw the same serious expression on Elder Meng's face, Elder Bo Yen knew that they really had no way out. The surroundings fell into a dead silence. Only below, the mountains and forests were frozen and falling. The sound of rocks freezing and cracking could be heard one after another. Even if one didn't look, it wasn't hard to tell from these sounds that the Thousand Wine Mountain and the surrounding mountains were in a mess. Bo Yen, we have to make a decision quickly. Not far away, an elder couldn't help but urge, his face full of worry. Activating the Sky Shuttle Array also requires a certain amount of time. If this dragged on, the situation would become even more uncontrollable. Elder Bo Yen frowned, his fists clenched so tightly that his bones creaked. Elder Meng suddenly closed his eyes. Bo Yen, activate the Sky Shuttle Array. Elder Meng. Elder Bo Yen opened his mouth and wanted to say a few more words, but when he saw Elder Meng's face, which seemed to have aged a lot in an instant, the rest of his words were stuck in his throat and he couldn't say anything. It was harder for Elder Meng to make this decision than him. In order to help her guard the divine territory, he would rather not step out of Pingmin Mountain for a few years. Just this point alone was enough to see Elder Meng's favoritism for that girl. If something really happened to her, how could Elder Meng feel good in his heart? But in front of the academy, he would definitely choose to protect the academy first. Elder Bo Yen held his breath, raised his arm, and then slammed it down. Activate the Sky Shuttle Array. Just as he finished speaking, there was a blur in front of everyone's eyes. There were actually two figures that rushed towards Thousand Wine Mountain. Senior Shengwan. Rong Xiao. When the crowd saw the two figures clearly, they were all shocked. Just now, they had already experienced the terror of that cold energy. Just the cold energy that leaked out was already so terrifying. Who knew how dangerous the source of the spring would be? If they went down now, wouldn't they be courting death? However, the two figures still charged down without any hesitation. Shengwan Jing's speed was extremely fast, and the cold energy was so strong that it almost cut his face. But at this time, he couldn't care about that. The lower he went, the stronger the blocking force. His speed gradually slowed down. Even the origin power in his body was gradually slowing down. This made Shengwan Jing even more shocked. He was a god-level master, and it was already so difficult for him to face this force, let alone Yu-Er. Suddenly, a golden light flashed in front of his eyes. A figure was actually heading straight for the mouth of the spring at an even faster speed than him. Rong Xiao. Shengwan Jing's heart skipped a beat, and a thought quickly flashed through his mind. Rong Xiao was a god-level master. Why did he seem to be faster than him? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1534. However, before Shengwan Jing could think clearly about this problem, he suddenly saw Rong Xiao wave his sleeve. In the next moment, a ball of golden flames suddenly surged. Shengwan Jing was hit by this power and instantly retreated. Right at this moment, several silver lines suddenly appeared around the Thousand Wine Mountain. These lines overlapped and connected with each other. The sparkling light was exceptionally bright in the dark night. Swoosh! Right at this moment, a line as thick as a thumb suddenly flew past Shengwan Jing's eyes. His heart skipped a beat and he subconsciously raised his hand to block it. A sharp aura flashed, and the silver line soundlessly cut through his sleeves. When he saw the torn corner of his shirt fall down and be instantly torn apart by countless silver lines, Shengwan Jing suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It was so close. If not for Rong Xiao's help just now, the one who would have been pierced by this terrifying line would have been him. Senior Shengwan. The Sky Shuttle formation is extremely dangerous. Once it is activated, it will attack indiscriminately. Please come back as soon as possible. Elder Hua Feng hurriedly shouted. They had just activated the sky shuttle formation when they saw Sheng Wanjing and Rongxiu rushing down together. The speed of these two people was really too fast, so much so that they did not even have time to say a word to stop them. Once the sky shuttle formation was completely activated, the people inside would most likely die. When Sheng Wanjing heard this shout, he instantly understood something. Below, more and more silver lines were rapidly appearing around the Thousand Wine Mountain. Looking down from above, the lines crisscrossed and had an astonishing aura. He did not doubt Elder Huafeng's words at all. He also instantly understood why Elder Bo Yan was unwilling to agree to activate the sky shuttle formation. Once such a terrifying top-grade Xian formation was activated, its power could not be controlled at all. His gaze was heavy as he looked at the spring's eye. Countless silver lines crisscrossed and almost completely covered the spring's eye. He could not see Rongxiu or Yu Er. What he could barely see was the spring water that was still gurgling out. Under the dark night, it was almost impossible to see the color of the spring water clearly. However, under the illumination of the countless silver lines, he could vaguely see the faint blood-colored cold light of the spring water. Swoosh! Another silver line narrowly flew past his body. Sheng Wanjing clenched his teeth and retreated quickly. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? He had wasted so much time for nothing. Iwanzwa stood with his hands behind his back and sneered as he looked at the huge sky shuttle array that gradually appeared. You should know that after delaying for so long, even the surrounding few mountains will be affected. No one spoke. Almost all of the elders were working with Elder Bo Yan to activate the sky shuttle formation. This great formation was created by the first dean of the academy and the elders of the academy back then. Therefore, if they wanted to open it now, they would need many experts to work together. At this point, even Elder Meng had injected his origin power into it. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, Iwanzwo was displeased. But when he thought about how they were all in the middle of activating the sky shuttle array, it was normal that they had no time to pay attention to him. He suppressed his anger. Jun Jiuqing stood behind him, also staring down at the scene below. His eyes were thick and his expression was complicated, making it hard for others to see through him. This night was a sleepless night for all the students and elders of Lingxiao College. Even though the students had listened to the elders' instructions and returned to their own residences. But with such a huge commotion on Thousand Wine Mountain, how could it not attract everyone's attention? After sensing the terrifying energy fluctuation, the students on the various mountain tops started to gather again. Their gazes were fixed on the Thousand Wine Mountain. Under the dark and gloomy sky, only the 10,000 Wine Mountain shone brightly. Countless silver lines crisscrossed around it, and soon surrounded Thousand Wine Mountain. The light was not blinding, but it was exceptionally bright in the dark night. It almost lit up half the sky. At the same time, everyone could see that Thousand Wine Mountain and the surrounding mountains were completely covered by a layer of blood-red frost. Several elders of the academy gathered in the air and attacked together. One had to know that those who could become elders of Lingxiao College were the top experts in the entire world of divine ruins. Any one of them who stood out was a big shot who could intimidate a region. And now, they were attacking together to activate a large formation to deal with the danger of Thousand Wine Mountain. I wonder what kind of secret is hidden under Thousand Wine Mountain. It's so dangerous, no wonder the elders of the academy value Thousand Wine Mountain so much. It turns out that TSK, we used to go there often, this Xian formation is extremely powerful. It should be able to solve the problem of Thousand Wine Mountain, right? But, is Sheng Wanyu still inside? Ah! I don't think I saw her come out. This. Who else would be able to come out safely from such a situation? This time, Sheng Wanyu might not be able to escape. Time seemed to be passing very slowly. After about 15 minutes, the sky shuttle formation was finally activated. The huge and complicated Xian formation enveloped the entire Thousand Wine Mountain. Powerful, sacred, majestic, murderous aura filled the air. After a short period of silence, the sky shuttle formation started to rotate slowly. A silver line flew out from the middle of it. Immediately after, everyone saw that the 10,000 Wines Mountain suddenly shifted from its position halfway up the mountain. Digression, 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Not to mention that the entire Thousand Wine Mountain was made of this. It could be seen that the Academy had really invested a lot back then. The more Elder Bo Yen and the others watched, the more shocked they became. The construction of the 10,000 Wine Mountain was not cheap, and over the past 10,000 years, it had consumed a great deal of effort and energy from the Academy's dean and elders. However, the more it was like this, the more it proved how shocking the thing being suppressed was. Even the elders present were secretly shocked when they saw the sky shuttle formation flickering with flowing light and felt the frightening pressure from it. In this situation, if they were the ones going down, they might not be able to return alive. The only thing that comforted them was that after the sky shuttle array was activated, the strange cold chi from the spring did not continue to expand. Moreover, as the Thousand Wine Mountain was cut into such a state, the blood-colored frost that originally covered it also cracked and formed cracks. From the looks of it, there seemed to be signs of it being suppressed back. But, and Rong Xiao and Yu, were still down there. There seemed to be raging waves in Sheng Wanjing's eyes. He stood with his hands behind his back and gradually clenched his fists. The aura on his body also gradually became cold and dangerous. Even he did not dare to barge into the sky shuttle array forcefully. Therefore, the only thing he could do now was to wait. Wait for Yu and Rong Xiao to return together. Sheng Wanjing took a deep breath and tried his best to calm himself down. Other than that, there was no other possibility. Splash! Rong Xiao charged into the spring without hesitation. The spring water continued to surge and swallowed his figure in an instant. Golden light flickered around him. The spring was not deep, and he quickly saw a familiar figure. Chu Luiyue was quietly suspended in the water, almost close to the bottom of the spring. Sensing the dense cold air on her body, Rong Xiao was shocked and quickly approached. At this moment, he saw that Chu Luiyue's body had already condensed a thick layer of blood-colored frost. There was a terrifying cold air that was constantly surging out from the cracks on the rocks at the bottom. Most of it blended in the spring water and spewed out. A small portion surged towards Chu Luiyue. In this short period of time, the frost on her body seemed to be condensing and thickening. Rong Xiao reached out to hug her. However, before his hand could touch her body, it was as if countless sharp flying knives were approaching rapidly. He frowned. With a bang, a golden flame ignited on his fingertip. The scorching temperature caused the surrounding water to emit a slight sizzling sound. Then, he stepped forward firmly and carefully held her hand. It was cold to the touch, and the coldness seemed to spread from his palm to the bottom of his heart. Rong Xiao's eyes flashed with a biting cold murderous intent. The golden flame on his hand suddenly erupted again. However, his movements were still cautious, afraid that he would use too much strength and hurt Chu Luiyue in front of him. Now, her entire body was frozen, and she had almost turned into a huge ice man. Rong Xiao did not dare to slack or relax. The golden flame quickly spread along Chu Luiyue's hand to the surroundings. The thick blood-colored frost that had accumulated began to show signs of melting. Finally, after a long while, half of her hand finally broke free from the layer of ice. Rong Xiao stepped forward and grabbed her slender fingers. His palm was boiling hot, which made her body seem even colder. Rong Xiao leaned closer. At this moment, the two of them faced each other, and he finally saw her appearance clearly. Under the layer of ice, her eyes were tightly shut, her lips were pale, and her brows were slightly furrowed. She had always been patient. For her to show such an expression, it could be seen that she had experienced a lot of torture when she was frozen by the frost. Rong Xiao carefully touched her hand. Suddenly, he paused and looked down. With this look, he saw that the area between her thumb and index finger was broken, and it looked like a bloody mess. It seemed to be the source of the frigid aura that had entered her body. At this moment, the frozen frost had melted a little. Chu Liuyue's wrist was also exposed. Rong Xiao put his finger on it and separated a bit of energy to check the situation in her body. Her force was frozen, and her yuan meridian was blocked by the cold air. It was equivalent to half of her body being crippled. Rong Xiao's eyes were sharp, and a thick black color flashed across his eyes. It was bitterly cold. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1537. Outside Thousand Wine Mountain, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the sky shuttle formation completely enveloped the huge mountain peak. Silver lines drifted slowly and silently, the entire myriad wine mountain was completely cut apart. The blood-colored frost that covered the mountain peak started to melt and seep into the ground bit by bit. Everyone waited in silence, staring at the spring on the mountain peak. The water rippled, but there was no movement at all. And the two figures they wanted to see did not appear again. Time seemed to be especially unbearable. A ray of light shone through the thick clouds and shone on the ground. Everything seemed to have lifted the black veil and revealed its original appearance. Elder Bo Yen looked up in a daze. It was daybreak. This night was so long. Bo Yen, the frost on the surrounding mountains has all melted. Elder Hua Feng's voice was a little hoarse. Elder Bo Yen looked in the direction he was pointing. Indeed, under the powerful suppression of the sky shuttle formation, the blood-colored frost that had spread around had all disappeared. Only the Thousand Wine Mountain still had some scattered frost. There was more around the spring on the mountain peak, but it seemed that it would not last much longer. The sky shuttle formation also looked smaller than before. It started to gather all the surrounding power to the center and focus on dealing with the remaining frost. At this time, the silver lines basically only covered the Thousand Wine Mountain. But, the Thousand Wine Mountain was now riddled with holes and was unrecognizable. It was no longer a mountain. Instead, it was a huge stone sculpture. Its shape was twisted and strange. And what was even more shocking was that the layers of intersecting mountain rocks were still slowly rotating with the sky shuttle formation. Every line looked so elegant and bright, but it also carried a dense killing intent. They knew very well how terrifying the power of the sky shuttle formation was. Once touched, it could unquestionably kill everything, including all the living beings in it. The places where the blood-colored frost had disappeared were all charred black and still looked lifeless. One could imagine how much time and effort it would take to restore everything to its original state. What is this? Elder Bo Yen stared at the spring and could not help but mutter softly. As if suppressed by the sky shuttle formation, there was no more spring water gushing out from the spring and it returned to its original state. The water was still, and a circle of frost had condensed at the edge. But the spring water was dark black and no one could see the situation inside clearly. The gray stones piled up around them had already been crushed by the power of the sky shuttle array and shattered into countless tiny pieces. This scene made everyone's heart sank. Because the rocks around the spring were also very special. Tianlei had landed on them for many years, but they had never been damaged. Now, in front of the sky shuttle formation, they did not even have the confidence of sky shuttle formation. The situation, the two people in the spring. Elder Bo Yen rubbed the space between his brows, feeling extremely exhausted. Both of them held important statuses. Needless to say, the dean and elders had always been on good terms with the two children. After a moment of silence, he looked at the other elders. He named a few people. You guys stay here first. The rest of you go back and rest. After a night of torment, everyone was already exhausted. Even for Wanzheng and the rest, they were merely relying on their willpower to forcefully hang on. Once the Sky Shuttle formation is activated, it will continue to operate for a month. In this month, there will be people guarding here every day. So in this month, we cannot let down our guard. We have to be careful, understand? In other words, this was a battle of attrition. If they all collapsed the next day, all their efforts might be for naught. Hearing Elder Bo Yan's words, the other elders knew the pros and cons and nodded in agreement. Also, when you go back, remember to calm the students down. Elder Bo Yan sighed in his heart. Although the chaos at Thousand Wine Mountain did not cause many casualties, it was inevitable that the students would be hesitant and worried. During this period of time, Lingshao Academy was in constant trouble, which was enough to make people worried. Plus this time, in this month, no one is allowed to enter or leave the college as they wish. Everything must be reported to me and I will personally approve it. The elders were shocked. But on second thought, this was a special period, so there was nothing wrong with doing this. After agreeing, most of the elders went back. Only Elder Wanzheng and the others were still guarding the place. Senior Shangwan, why don't you go back and rest first? Elder Huafeng hesitated for a moment, but still spoke tentatively. We'll guard this place. Once the two of them come out, we'll tell you immediately. Shangwan Jing shook his head. I'll wait here. It's fine. You don't have to worry about me. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a faint green color under his eyes. He looked exceptionally haggard. In fact, although he was a god expert, his divine body had been asleep for 1,000 years, and his soul had drifted away. The moment he woke up, he hurriedly rushed to Lingshao College from the northern border of the primordial world. He did not have the time to properly recuperate. His strength could not be compared to his peak back then. It was because of this that Elder Huafeng was very worried about him. Seeing Shangwan Jing's determined attitude, Elder Huafeng's lips moved, but he swallowed the rest of his words. That's good. If you have any requests, just let me know. He clenched his fists. We'll wait with you. Shangwan Jing nodded. His voice was low and slightly hoarse. Thank you. Wishful thinking. Ewen's cold mocking voice suddenly came from the side. The Sky Shuttle array has been activated. Even a god expert can't escape from it. Let alone those two people. Of course, he knew that Rong Xiao and Sheng Wanyu were both top geniuses of the younger generation. To be able to break through and become a god expert at such a young age, they were very rare in the entire Divine Ruins world. But so what? A god was just a god. Elder Huafeng's expression changed when he heard this. You don't have to worry about these things. Shangwan Jing pulled Elder Huafeng and looked coldly at Yuanzhua. You're not the dean, and the power of the academy is not in your hands. It has nothing to do with Rong Xiao and you, We haven't even said anything yet. What right do you have to criticize and criticize? Yuanzhua's expression turned cold. Previously, I gave you some face for the sake of the Spirit Firmament Academy. Don't push your luck. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1538. Shangwan Jing's words were very harsh and did not leave any face for Yuanzhua. In front of Elder Bo Yen and the others, it was simply a slap to his face. Wenzuo's face was ashen. His sleeves fluttered, and he was about to attack. Senior Shengwan is a weapon refining supremacy. He has been in the divine ruins world for 1,000 years and has a noble status. Wenzuo, what do you mean by this? Do you want to attack? Elder Meng suddenly spoke. His tone was faint, but there was a hint of coldness. Wenzuo was speechless. His status as the deputy dean was indeed nothing in front of a weapon refining supremacy. One had to know that even in the entire divine ruins world, a weapon refining supremacy was definitely a top expert who could do whatever he wanted. Compared to a god of the same level, or even a medical supremacy, he had more right to speak. He clenched his fists tightly and swallowed his anger with great difficulty. Master, didn't you say that you came back this time to look for something at the Dongwang Bell Tower? Jun Juqing suddenly spoke, breaking the cold atmosphere. The situation at Thousand Wine Mountain has basically stabilized. With Elder Meng and the others here, you don't have to worry too much. These words gave Wenzuo a way out, attributing his previous sarcastic words and excessive behavior to him being worried about the academy. Wenzuo finally stopped and snorted coldly. I hope this sky shuttle array can completely solve the problem. With that, he flicked his sleeve and quickly left, heading straight for the Dongwang Bell Tower. Jun Juqing hesitated for a moment, looked back at Thousand Wine Mountain, and finally followed. The two figures quickly disappeared into the distance. Wenzuo was the deputy dean. Although the power to manage the academy was in the hands of Elder Bo Yen, he still had the qualifications to go to the Dongwang Bell Tower. It seems that he has accumulated a lot of resentment in the past few years. Elder Meng looked at their backs and frowned. Elder Huafeng sneered. Hasn't he always been like this? Back then, Wenzuo was determined to get the position of dean. After confirming that the position of dean was passed to his junior brother, he had not recovered for a long time. From then on, he had already developed resentment in his heart. He blamed the previous principal, who was also his master, and also blamed his junior brother, who was the current principal of the academy. A few years ago, when the dean left and passed the authority to Bo Yen, his dissatisfaction reached its peak. If it wasn't for this, he wouldn't have left the academy so decisively and not returned for several years. Moreover, during this period, he didn't care about the academy at all. Wenzuo always felt that everyone in the world had wronged him, but he never knew how to reflect on himself. He had never thought about why he had never had a share in the position of dean, and why everyone was so disgusted with him. When the academy is in danger, the first thing he thinks about is himself. Since his return, has he done anything for the academy or the students? Elder Huafeng had disliked him for a long time and had been enduring it silently. But this time, Wenzuo's attitude was truly disgusting. Those who don't know would think that he came back to laugh at us. That's enough. None of this is important right now. Elder Bo Yen seemed to be very open-minded about this matter. In the next month, the most important thing is to guard the sky shuttle array. Everyone nodded and didn't mention anything else. Elder Meng. Shengwan Jing suddenly spoke. Regarding years past in the academy, I wonder. Can you tell me about it? Actually, he could tell that many elders in the academy treated you very well. But considering that Elder Meng had the highest status here and had helped him guard the divine realm for several years, it was probably the most appropriate to ask him. Elder Meng waved his hand repeatedly. You're too polite. Just call me Meng Xian. As for that girl, it's a long story. He narrowed his eyes as if he was recalling something. Speaking of you, it was actually a coincidence that she came to Lingxiao College back then. The 10,000 Wine Mountain was completely enveloped by the sky shuttle array. It was so tight that it was almost airtight. From the outside, one could only see the half-mountain that had been cut into pieces and countless intertwined silver lines. In the air, there were elders guarding all directions. That terrifying cold air seemed to have been completely sealed, and it didn't cause as terrifying a commotion as before. But the students all knew that the Sky Shuttle array still had to be guarded for a month. So they didn't dare to let their guard down. All the students obediently stayed in their own areas, either resting or cultivating. Almost all the people who went to the Qingming Square were gone. What happened on the 10,000 Wine Mountain that day was like a heavy stone that pressed down on many people's hearts. As long as the Sky Shuttle array didn't completely suppress it, they couldn't be at ease. Of course, there were also some people who were more worried about Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue who were still inside. It's been 3 days. The Sky Shuttle array is still operating, and the frost on the 10,000 Wine Mountain is also decreasing. I don't know when they will come out. On a mountain peak, a few people from the Luo family were gathered. The person who spoke was Luo Yanming. They had originally planned to spar and cultivate together, but they weren't in the mood, so they put it aside for the time being. At this moment, their attention was still on the 10,000 Wine Mountain. Shuoxing couldn't help but scratch his head. This. Rong Xiao, Chu, and Shangguanyu are all exalted gods, and Rong Xiao has a divine body. They should be able to come out, right? Also, doesn't Shangguanyu have a few trump cards? Although he said that, his tone was full of uneasiness, and his eyes couldn't hide the worry in them. The two of them were indeed very powerful, and they also had extremely powerful trump cards. However, the 10,000 Wine Mountain was in big trouble this time, and it wouldn't be so easy to deal with. The 10,000 Wine Mountain should be razed to the ground in a month, right? Luo Shishir muttered absent-mindedly. The few of them fell silent. If the two of them hadn't come out by then, the Sky Shuttle array was so terrifying that even Elder Meng and Sheng Wanjing couldn't do anything about it. What could they do? What are those two doing? Suddenly, Shuoxing's gaze focused in a certain direction. The few of them followed his gaze and saw that on the opposite mountain peak, halfway up the mountain, there were two people huddled together and talking about something. From time to time, they would even gesture with their hands. It seemed like they were discussing something. Are they? Lin Qifei and Mu Hongyu. Luo Shishir was a little surprised. Why are the two of them together? I heard that Lin Qifei was once saved by the princess of the Yuntian Tower. She should be Sheng Wanyu. Mu Hongyu is also her good friend. However, the two of them don't seem to know each other before this. Speaking of which, these two people should be the most worried about the situation on the 10,000 Wine Mountain. However, what were they doing? On the mountain opposite them, Lin Qifei looked at Mu Hongyu. Are you sure you can save them this way? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1539. Mu Hongyu sighed. I can't guarantee that it'll work. But this is the only way I can think of at the moment. Lin Qifei thought for a moment and nodded. All right, I'll help you. He raised his hand. Please follow me. As he spoke, he led the way to the cave at the side. Mu Hongyu followed closely behind. The cave was a little dark and very quiet. But soon, Mu Hongyu realized that this cave was different from the other caves. Lin Qifei walked in front. After walking for a distance, a bright light suddenly appeared on the ground in front of him. This light illuminated the cave, and because it was some distance away from the entrance of the cave, it was not noticed by those outside. Mu Hongyu looked down curiously and realized that it was a small xian formation. I specially set up these xian formations to prevent outsiders from entering. Lin Qifei explained as he walked. Follow my steps. Don't take the wrong path. Okay. Mu Hongyu replied as she carefully followed Lin Qifei's footsteps. After walking for a while, Lin Qifei finally stopped. "We're here." Mu Hongyu also stopped in her tracks and looked ahead. The scene in front of her made her eyes widen in shock. This was a huge cave. From the marks on the surrounding stone walls, it seemed to have been dug out not long ago. "The previous cave was a little small, so I expanded it a little," Lin Qifei said calmly and pointed to the ground in front of them. "At least it's barely enough." Mu Hongyu held her breath. There was nothing else on the ground. It was a huge and complicated Xian formation. No, to be precise, it was a teleportation formation. This teleportation formation has not been used, so I can't be sure if it can send you out of the Divine Ruins world. Lin Qifei frowned. He had been secretly preparing for this for a long time. But even though he was extremely talented, it was still difficult for him to create such a teleportation formation alone. He did not expect the accident to come so quickly. "It's fine. I have the faint essence body. Even if something happens to this teleportation array, I can just escape." Mu Hongyu waved her hand, but there was no trace of worry on her face. Ever since she had undergone that inhuman training in the Red Moon Desert, her ability to resist attacks had greatly improved. For ordinary cultivators, if something were to happen to the teleportation array midway, they would have a slim chance of surviving. However, she did not have such concerns. As she spoke, she took a step forward and stood on top of the teleportation array. Lin Qifei stared at her. "Be careful." With that, he activated the teleportation array. With a flash of light, Mu Hongyu's figure disappeared from the spot. Days passed. The elders outside the Myriad Wine Mountain were rotated as usual. However, Shengguan Jing, Elder Meng, and Elder Bo Yen were there every day. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Chapter 1540. Wounds kept appearing on his body, but these wounds healed at an alarming rate. It was as if he had fallen into a strange cycle. However, this process was obviously a long torture for Rongxiu. He looked at the person in his arms. Although she had not fully woken up, there were no wounds on her body, and the cold air was slowly withdrawing from her body. He heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he held her slender waist and pulled her tightly into his embrace. After such a long time, her body gradually regained some warmth. Rongxiu activated the force in his body and held her hand tightly, expelling the remaining cold air. It was silent all around, as if all sounds from the outside world had been cut off. Looking up, there were dark ripples on the water. Looking down, it was a pile of shattered rocks. In the middle, there were countless flowing silver lights. That was the power of the Sky Shuttle Array. Perhaps it was because of this power, although there were several cracks on the rocks at the bottom, they had temporarily stopped spreading. Moreover, most of the frost around them had dissipated. Only a thin layer of frost remained stubbornly on the rocks. Halfway up the mountain, Luo Yanming and Luo Yanlin sat facing each other. There was a chessboard between the two of them. Luo Yanming's brows were tightly knitted, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He had been staring at the chessboard for a full 15 minutes, but he had yet to place a piece. Being too cautious is being indecisive, Luo Yanlin said leisurely. Luo Yanming was even more nervous. He fiddled with the piece in his hand for a while, and finally placed it down hesitantly. Luo Yanlin placed a piece almost immediately after that. Clack. You lost. Luo Yanming's aura suddenly weakened, and he looked ashamed. Fourth brother, I'm too useless. He knew that his fourth brother was deliberately letting him win. Unfortunately, he was not talented enough, and could not be compared to his fourth brother. You've been steady and hardworking since you were young. Just this alone has made you better than many people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to get into Lingxiao College. Luo Yanlin laughed, and his attitude towards him was very amiable. He raised his chin. Go back and study this game on your own. Yes. Luo Yanming replied respectfully. However, there was still a hint of loneliness in her eyes. What happened? Luo Yanlin noticed that something was wrong with his mood, so he asked a few more questions. Luo Yanming was silent for a long time before she looked up and asked, Fourth brother, I know that with my talent, no matter how hard I work, I won't be able to surpass you in this lifetime. There are even many people in the academy who are more talented than me. Do you think there's any meaning to me living like this day after day? To Luo Yanming's surprise, her fourth brother wasn't as angry as she had expected. Instead, he smiled. Is this what you've been thinking about all this time? Luo Yanming nodded uneasily. In fact, this emotion had troubled him for a very long time. It had been a few months since he entered Lingxiao College. At first, he was full of confidence, but gradually, he realized that he was not that outstanding. Although he had a calm temperament, he was used to keeping things in his heart, which was why he couldn't get over it. Actually, this is very normal. Almost all the top geniuses in the divine ruins have gathered here. However, there can only be one number one, and there has to be a winner. Your talent is definitely among the top. As long as you persevere in your cultivation, there will be a day when you stand out. Luo Yanming hesitated for a moment. It wasn't that he didn't understand these principles, but it required a lot of mental strength to digest them. Luo Yanlin raised an eyebrow. Actually, I think that your luck is pretty good. The most talented person in your batch should be Lin Qifei, right? Luo Yanming nodded. If I were to fight against him, my chances of winning are about 30%. At this point, his expression was a little gloomy. He had thought that the two of them would be able to fight to a draw, but later he realized that Lin Qifei was far more talented than him. If Lin Qifei had the same background as him, he would have already. 30% is high enough. Luo Yanlin suddenly laughed. He stood up, walked over, and patted his shoulder. When I first came to the academy, my opponents were Sheng Guanyu and Rong Xiu, those two freaks. You should be glad that Sheng Guanyu hid her identity and only followed Elder Wanjing to cultivate as a celestial physician. Otherwise... Luo Yanming asked curiously, Fourth brother, you've known her for a long time. Fourth brother, you knew her before. How talented is she as a mystic cultivator? Sheng Guanyu was extremely talented in both celestial physician and martial artist. They knew this very well. The only thing she hadn't shown in front of everyone was that she was a Xian master. Luo Yanlin's expression was rather complicated. There was even a hint of bitterness in it. Finally, he took a deep breath and asked, I only have one thing to tell you. I only want to tell you one thing. Do you know why there is no gate in Fangzhou City? That's because she damaged it 3 times in a month. She also left a mark beside the gate, which damaged the barrier. The elders had no choice but to build a new barrier. The elders were so angry that they decided to tear down the gate in a fit of pique. Also, do you really think that Rong Xiu was the one who taught her how to break the barrier? Luo Yanming was dumbfounded. Kid, there are many geniuses in this world. Instead of doubting yourself, why don't you focus on improving your strength? Luo Yanming pondered for a long time before nodding heavily. When the Sky Shuttle array was activated, it was only because all of them worked together that they were able to succeed. During this period of time, the Sky Shuttle array had been operating normally without any problems. For a Xian formation of this level, if it wasn't disturbed by external forces, it definitely wouldn't be like this. If it's not us, then, could it be inside? Elder Hua Feng muttered. Suddenly, his expression changed. What? Elder Bo Yen did not understand. Inside. Inside what? Was it the mountain of 10,000 wines or the mouth of the spring? Suddenly, his expression turned stern. Impossible. The sky shuttle array had clearly suppressed it. Tomorrow would be the last day. The frost on Thousand Wine Mountain had completely melted. Even the ice that had formed above the spring had disappeared. Looking from above, it was a sea of rippling light, no different from before. In their opinion, that strange cold air had already been destroyed by the sky shuttle array. They only needed to wait until tomorrow to completely destroy Thousand Wine Mountain. Then, everything would be over. Why did something happen at this time? But after saying this, Elder Bo Yen felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in his heart. Look! There seems to be something wrong with the sky shuttle array. An elder exclaimed in shock. Elder Bo Yen and the others' hearts skipped a beat as they instinctively looked over. They saw that the countless crisscrossing silver lines on Thousand Wine Mountain were quietly floating up. They were retreating from the center of the spring. It was as if an invisible hand was slowly pushing away the power of the sky shuttle array bit by bit. Seeing this scene, everyone present was dumbfounded and couldn't regain their senses for a long time. Every line on the sky shuttle array has its own trajectory. Now, it's being forcefully changed by external forces. Sheng Wanjing sucked in a cold breath. Who exactly is it that has such great power? No one knew. They didn't even know how all of this had happened. By the time they realized that something was wrong, it was already an irreversible situation. Everyone, get into position immediately. Restore the sky shuttle array to its original state. Elder Bo Yan's figure moved as he shouted loudly. But his face was still very pale. Because he knew too well that even if everyone worked together now, it would still be too late. Activating the sky shuttle array was already very difficult for them. Not to mention the current situation. But he had to react. There were still so many people in the academy. All the elders returned to their positions and surrounded the myriad wine mountain once again. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly came from Thousand Wine Mountain. No, it should be said that it came from under the spring. Thump. 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 It sounded like someone was hitting something hard. Again and again. It was as if something was going to rush out in the next moment. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1542. The 10,000 Wine Mountain was still collapsing. Only the spring in the middle seemed to be surrounded by an invisible barrier, so it was safe and sound. Only the knocking sounds that kept coming were strange and mysterious, causing one's heart to turn cold. This sky shuttle formation is starting to lose control. I'm afraid. Elder Hua Feng's face was pale. He was a Xian master, so he naturally knew how dangerous the current situation was. If it was the other formations in the academy, they might have a chance of winning if they attacked with all their strength. But this sky shuttle formation was completely different. Elder Bo Yen frowned. Suddenly, a white light flashed through his mind. Heaven Scroll. He quickly turned to look at Elder Hua Feng. The sky shuttle formation was left behind by the first dean. Perhaps the Heaven Scroll has a way to break it. Almost instantly, Elder Hua Feng understood Elder Bo Yan's meaning. You mean, the Xian formation diagram left behind by that person back then? His eyes lit up at first, but then that light quickly disappeared. But, there are at least 100 Xian formation diagrams in the Heaven Scroll, and all of them are extremely complicated. How can we completely comprehend them in such a short time and then use them to solve our current predicament? This was simply a fool's dream. For many years, the things left behind by the first dean had been carefully stored by the academy and would not be easily taken out for others to see. On one hand, those things were indeed treasures. On the other hand, there were not many people who could comprehend them. To put it bluntly, even a great Xian King teacher like Elder Hua Feng had to make contributions to the academy before he had the right to take a look. And he might not be able to completely comprehend even a single scroll in a year. Not to mention the others. Elder Bo Yan's expression instantly dimmed. It was indeed too late to think about this now. But, could it be that they could only watch on helplessly as everything happened? Rumble. As they spoke, the 10,000 Wine Mountain was still collapsing. Those lines on the sky shuttle formation were stirred by an invisible force and had already started to become chaotic. Flowing light flew everywhere, and energy exploded. The towering and steep mountain peaks split into pieces. The incomparably hard rocks turned into dust. Dust flew everywhere, and it was a boundless expanse. The night grew darker and darker, like a giant beast about to devour everything. Red Moon Desert. A blood-red full moon hung high in the night sky. The moonlight shone down, covering the boundless desert with a faint layer of crimson. It was eerily cold. In the depths of the desert, there was a lake that rippled with blue waves, quiet and tranquil. When the blood moon rose into the sky, a faint crimson color was reflected on the surface of the lake. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the middle of the lake. The crack grew bigger and bigger, gradually opening up a path. A tiny figure slowly walked out from it. She was dressed in brocade, with snow-white skin and purple eyes. His thick and long eyelashes cast a faint shadow on his eyelids, which seemed to add a bit of coldness to his entire person. The night wind blew, stirring up ripples and curling up his short purple hair. It was Dugu Maobao. He stood still on the lake and looked up at the sky. A dark look flashed across his eyes. For many years, it was only on the night of the blood moon that they were able to temporarily escape from the cage and obtain a moment of freedom. However, they had been living like this for too long, and they had long grown tired of it. Now that he had risked his life to refine his divine body, he had a few days of leisure. However, after leaving this desert, he still could not use his divine power at will. Otherwise, it would be a great danger. It's been so long, and they haven't come yet. They probably haven't noticed. A translucent figure flew out from under the lake. It was Diwu Zhangze. Dugu Maobao retracted his gaze and shook his head. Not necessarily. After all, he had attacked in the Divine Ruins world. Although he had used many methods to cover it up, but those people were not to be trifled with. They were not moving now. Perhaps they were just secretly observing. Or perhaps they had other considerations. Diwu Zhangze frowned. During this period, you even forced your divine body into a deep sleep in order to hide your aura. No matter how capable they are, they won't be able to find any evidence. Without evidence, they could not do anything. Although they were trapped in this cage back then, it was not as if they had no way out. At the very least, if those people casually barged into the Red Moon Desert, they could have killed them unconditionally. Fortunately, Lan Xiao left such a trick up his sleeve during the negotiation back then. Otherwise, we would have been passive everywhere. Diwu Zhangze sighed. Dugu Maobao nodded and turned around. How's his recovery now? Previously, after he did his best to help Lan Xiao, he fell into a deep sleep and had just woken up today. Diwu Zhangze laughed. Don't worry, with such a rotten face, he won't be willing to die just like that. He has almost recovered in the past 2 days. Calculating the time, he should be waking up soon. Whose face are you calling rotten? An ethereal and lazy voice sounded. The two turned around and saw Lan Xiao walking out from under the lake. His phantom seemed to have solidified a lot, and his aura had almost returned to its previous level. As for that face, As expected, it was a new face. Handsome and heroic, suave and elegant. He looked at Dugu Mabao with a smile and teased. You usually ignore me, but at the critical moment, you still care about me. The corner of Diwu Zhang's mouth twitched. He had just come back to life, but he was looking for death again. Indeed, it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but difficult to change one's nature. Dugu Mabao looked at him expressionlessly and reminded him coldly. Your face now belongs to your 12th junior brother. Lan Zhao's expression changed. He hurriedly looked down and then let out a scream. A handsome face was reflected on the surface of the water. No wonder he felt a little familiar just now. It was that bastard's. Why didn't you say so earlier? Before he finished speaking, Lan Zhao's figure had already disappeared under the lake again. Even after he left, he didn't forget to curse bitterly. It's been 10,000 years, and you still remember it so clearly. You pervert. Dugu Mabao looked indifferent. You're too forgetful. Lan Zhao didn't reply. He was probably busy tearing that face apart. Diwu Zhangzi gave him a thumbs up. You're still the best. Dugu Mabao's eyebrows moved slightly. How long have I slept? It was probably time to return to the academy. Diwu Zhangzi thought for a moment and said, actually, it's not that long. Probably, Russell. Before he finished speaking, a sound suddenly came from afar. The two of them immediately became alert. Dugu Mabao's expression turned cold, and he was about to attack. Diwu Zhangzi looked from afar and hurriedly said, wait. It's little Hongyu. Dugu Mabao's frown deepened. He had just sent Mu Hongyu to Lingxiao College not long ago. Why was she back now? Suddenly, his expression changed. Something happened. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1543. The air vibrated. Mu Hongyu took a step forward and landed heavily on the ground. Ouch, she rubbed her head. It hurts. Lin Qifei didn't lie to her. This teleportation array wasn't reliable at all. She only managed to survive with her void energy physique. If it were anyone else, they would have been killed countless times. Little Hongyu. A familiar voice sounded. Mu Hongyu looked up in surprise. Senior Diwu. She looked at the old man who suddenly appeared in front of her in shock, and her almond-shaped eyes were wide open. Although she had cultivated with Diwu Zhangzi in the Red Moon Desert for a long time, she had never seen his true appearance. But why did he look like a soul? Diwu Zhangzi's heart sank as he looked at Mu Hongyu, who was covered in injuries and in a sorry state. Little Hongyu, why did you suddenly come back? And your injuries? Upon hearing that, Mu Hongyu couldn't be bothered to be surprised. She hurriedly got up and said, Senior Diwu, something happened to Lu Yu. Quickly go and take a look. What happened to her? It wasn't Diwu Zhangzi who asked. Mu Hongyu was stunned. Then, she saw Dugu Mabao beside her. Although he looked like a child who was only a few years old and looked very cute, Mu Hongyu, who had seen his true strength, wouldn't really treat him as a child. She even felt relieved to see him now. She took a deep breath and hurriedly explained, I don't know what's wrong with the Academy's Wine Mountain. Lu Yu directly barged in. And Rong Xiao. In order to save Huiyue, he had also gone in. But before the two of them came out, the Academy activated the Sky Shuttle Array to suppress the Wine Mountain. Diwu Zhangzi was shocked and immediately looked at Dugu Mabao. That thing is coming out, and the Sky Shuttle Array is activated. You didn't know. Dugu Mabao's face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. During this period of time, he had been busy saving Lan Xiao and forced his divine body to go into hibernation. Naturally, he didn't know. Diwu Zhangze also immediately thought of this point, and his expression became somewhat vexed. How long has the sky shuttle array been open? Dugu Mabao asked in a deep voice. Mu Hongyu was stunned. I don't know. I used Lin Qifei's teleportation array to sneak out. There were a few troubles along the way, so I don't know how much time has passed. She looked very guilty. Dugu Mabao closed his eyes. A moment later, he opened his eyes. His clear and bright eyes were now dark and cold. The next moment, he raised his wrist slightly, and a piece of purple scale armor suddenly flew out. Wang! An enormous transmission array suddenly appeared before their eyes. Although she had seen it before, Mu Hongyu was still shocked by this scene. He could casually construct a teleportation array to enter and exit the Divine Ruins world. Just how strong was he? Dugu Mabao lifted his leg and walked into the teleportation array. Mu Hongyu hurriedly followed. Diwu Zhangze frowned. His lips moved, but he still chose to speak. Debao, when we go back this time, you must not use your divine power again. Last time, he was lucky enough to avoid it. But if he were to do it again, and it was in Lingxiao College, then, on the teleportation array, a bright light suddenly appeared. That bright light shone on his face, but it was as if a layer of frost had fallen. He didn't speak. The light flashed, and the two figures instantly disappeared. In the desert, only Diwu Zhangze was left. He looked at the place where the two had left. After a long time, he finally let out a long sigh. It was useless to persuade him. How could he sit by and do nothing when was in trouble? Last time, for her, he forcefully reconstructed his divine body. Even if he could only appear in front of others with the appearance of a child, he wouldn't hesitate. Not to mention other things. Lingxiao College. Dusk fell, but more than half of the college was already illuminated by the light of the Sky Shuttle Array. As time passed, the power of the Sky Shuttle Array became more chaotic. Flowing light flew everywhere, and it was extremely dangerous. The entire Thousand Wine Mountain had almost collapsed. Only the spring in the middle remained unmoved. At this moment, almost all the elders of the academy had gathered here. They all understood that this time, the college was in great danger. If something really happened to the college today, then the culprit is Sheng Wanyu. Yi Wenzhua, who had rushed over after hearing the commotion, was shocked for a long time after seeing the scene in front of him. This was the first thing he said. Some people looked over. Elder Bo Yen suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice, "Deputy Dean, now isn't the time to talk about this." Yi Wenzhua sneered. Am I wrong? If not for her, the Thousand Wine Mountain wouldn't be like this in order to let her contracted beast break through to become a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. The hidden danger in the Thousand Wine Mountain has been buried for tens of thousands of years. She couldn't be blamed for everything that had happened today. Moreover, she had already rushed down the moment the incident happened, and Rong Xiao was behind her. Elder Bo Yan's anger was also surging. He was already very worried about the current situation, and Yi Wenzhua was still mocking and ridiculing him. This was too much. Yi Wenzhua retorted, so what? Could it be that the lives of the two of them could be compared to the lives of Ling Xiao Academy? In my opinion, the dean was too good to her and spoiled her. Elder Bo Yen was furious. Suddenly, a deep and mellow voice came from afar. She's my disciple. What's wrong with me being good to her and spoiling her? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1544. This voice seemed to come from a very far place, but when it landed in everyone's ears, it was as clear as if it was right in front of them. Everyone was shocked and turned their heads to look. Under the black night sky, a figure was striding toward them. Elder Bo Yen and the others were pleasantly surprised. Dean! Ewen's expression changed. Why did he come back at this time? When the numerous students in the academy heard this voice, they all raised their heads in curiosity and looked over. Most of them had only heard of this dean in rumors, but had never seen him with their own eyes. In the Divine Ruins world, who didn't know that Lingshao College's dean, Nan Su Huai, was a top expert in the world? Celestial physician, martial artist, and mystic master, and all of them had reached an extremely high level. Many people who entered Lingshao College wanted to be his disciple. However, he had high standards and had only accepted one disciple over the years. He doted on this disciple to the extreme, to the point that it made one's hair stand on end. However, this master and disciple were both geniuses among geniuses, experts among experts. It made people envious and jealous, but they didn't know who to target. Countless people wanted to be Nan Su Huai's disciple, but at the same time, countless people wanted to be Chu Liuyue's master. Therefore, at this moment, most people were filled with curiosity and admiration as they looked at the person in the sky. It was an old man wearing a white robe with a green jade token at his waist. Other than that, he didn't have any other accessories on his body. He had white hair and a ruddy complexion, looking hale and hearty. The night wind blew, and his wide sleeves fluttered in the wind. At a glance, he looked like an immortal. In the blink of an eye, he had already flown from the horizon to the front of everyone. Many people were dumbfounded by this scene. This legendary dean was indeed worthy of his reputation. Dean! You're finally back. Elder Bo Yen immediately stepped forward. Elder Hua Feng and the others followed closely behind with excited expressions on their faces. They couldn't be blamed for being so, because they really didn't expect the dean to rush back at this time. In the past few years, the dean had been away and there had been no news. They announced to the outside world that the dean had gone out to travel, but only they knew that this was not the case. If not for the fact that Elder Bo Yen had a way to confirm that the dean was still safe and sound, they would have misunderstood that something had happened to the dean. During this period of time, the academy had been in constant trouble. Now, even the Sky Shuttle Array had a problem. At this moment, they were naturally filled with joy and excitement to see the dean return. Nan Su Huai patted Elder Bo Yen's shoulder. Bo Yen, it's been hard on you. Elder Bo Yen felt sour in his heart, but he immediately suppressed it and shook his head. You handed the academy over to me, so this is what I should do. It was just that. Bo Yan's incompetence had resulted in the current situation. Nan Su Huai smiled. You has stirred up trouble again, how can you be blamed for it? Don't worry, when she comes out, I'll definitely punish her. Elder Hua Feng and the others' eyes lit up when they heard this. Dean, can you save the two of them? Given the current situation, they didn't dare to have any hope. But since the dean said so, it proved that, Ewen's gritted his teeth. Junior brother, the Sky Shuttle Array has begun to collapse, how are you going to deal with it? Nan Su Huai glanced at him and smiled. You don't have to worry about it. With that, he turned his gaze and looked at the Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiao also went in. Elder Bo Yen and the others nodded in unison. Nan Su Huai sighed. His Highness is really magnanimous. Digression, his hands were already frozen and red and swollen. 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. It was as if he had casually plucked some of the power of heaven and earth, and easily transformed it into his own power, and condensed it into a profound formation. Great Grand Master. When the surrounding elders saw this scene, they were all shocked. To be able to perfectly fuse with the heaven and earth origin power, and even mobilize and condense it into a complicated profound formation, this was indeed something that only a great grandmaster could do. Could it be that the Dean has been busy making breakthroughs in the past few years? Elder Bo Yen could not help but mutter softly, his eyes still filled with amazement. Above the Mystic King division was the Great Mystic King division. Above that was the Great Grandmaster. On the surface, there was only a gap between a Great Xian King Master and a Great Grandmaster. However, in reality, it was extremely difficult to cross this natural chasm. Lingshao College had not had a Great Grandmaster breakthrough for 100 years. Even someone as talented as Nan Su Huai had stayed in the Great Xian King Master realm for a very long time. This is great. Elder Ouyang and the rest at the side were overjoyed. Now that the Dean has become a Great Grandmaster, he should be more confident in dealing with this sky shuttle formation. Hearing this, everyone nodded one after another, their minds also calmed down a lot. Yi Wenzhua had one hand behind his back as he stared at Nan Su Huai, who was in midair. His fists were clenched tightly, and his veins were popping out. Nan Su Huai actually defeated him again. During this period of time, he faintly felt that he was about to break through to the Great Grandmaster realm, but after waiting for a long time and trying many methods, he was still a little short in the end. Originally, he did not particularly care because he firmly believed that he would break through sooner or later. But now, seeing that Nan Su Huai had snatched it from him, his heart was instantly filled with unwillingness. But this kind of thing could not be rushed in a short period of time. He could only endure for the time being. Now, it was up to Nan Su Huai and the rest to see if they had the ability to protect Lingshao College. If they could not, Nan Su Huai would become a sinner for all eternity. At that time, it would not be too late for him to make a move. In less than half an incense's time, a huge Xian formation appeared in front of Nan Su Huai. Nan Su Huai's expression was solemn as he pushed his hands forward. Raging Waves Formation. That huge Xian formation began to descend slowly towards Thousand Wine Mountain. Vaguely, there seemed to be the sound of surging tides. The distance between the two Xian formations was constantly shrinking. The forces of both sides began to collide and entangle with each other. Light splashed in all directions. Even the surrounding space was shattered by this violent force, collapsing inch by inch. Everyone, listen to my command. Condense. Nan Su Huai suddenly shouted loudly. Everyone was already prepared. At this time, when they heard the command, they all attacked without holding back. The Raging Waves formation suddenly shone brightly. From afar, the two Xian formations looked like two huge gears that overlapped with each other. The Sky Shuttle formation was spurred by that strange force and spun faster. The appearance of the Stab Death and Raging Waves formation was to slow it down again. Although the Raging Waves formation's level was not as high as the Sky Shuttle formation, after gathering the strength of all the elders, it could barely contend with it. Gradually, the speed of the Sky Shuttle formation's rotation slowed down. Even those silver lines that had deviated from their original trajectory were affected by this force and began to return to their original positions. Everything seemed to be in order. Seeing this, all the elders heaved a sigh of relief. However, they still did not dare to let down their guard. For the past 20 days, there were no problems. However, on the last day, there was an accident. Moreover, it happened under their strict surveillance. The force that was suppressed under the spring was obviously far beyond their imagination. Therefore, until the last moment, their hearts would not be at ease no matter what. Everyone's strength was being consumed crazily. Among them, a few of the elders' faces had begun to turn pale. At this time, they were all relying on their willpower to support themselves. However, seeing the situation of Thousand Wine Mountain turning for the better, the pressure in their hearts lessened. Listen. That knocking sound seems to have disappeared. Amidst the silence, someone suddenly shouted. Everyone came back to their senses and instinctively leaned their ears to listen. As expected, the thumping sound had already disappeared. Now is the time. Nan Su Hui made up his mind and looked at the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain. Suddenly, he crushed the green jade token on his waist. Bang! In the next moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from the spring. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. It seemed to have been directly cut off from the elbow by someone. There were even faint traces of a sharp blade cutting through the wound. However, this arm, even the flesh, blood, and bones inside were all black. It is indeed a divine body. Shengguan Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. In this world, almost all cultivators could only have one divine body in their lifetime. A divine body could be separated from the physical body, but it couldn't exist alone. Back then, he had buried his divine body in the tomb. His physical body was destroyed, but his soul was still there. That was why he was able to wake up again after 1,000 years. However, he had never heard of a divine body that had such terrifying power after cutting off half an arm. After destroying the two Xian formations, that hand went straight for Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue again. That hand was very big, and it was enough to grab the two of them and crush them forcefully. The biting cold air kept getting closer. Rong Xiao turned around and saw that the hand was already in front of him. A blood-colored totem was faintly discernible in the palm. A vast pressure came rushing over. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1547. Swoosh. A figure quickly appeared in front of Rong Xiao and Shengguan Xiao. It was Nan Su Hui. I'll deal with this. Rong Xiao, bring you back. Nan Su Hui shouted. When the two of them came out, he saw Yu lying in Rong Xiao's arms. She seemed to have fainted. He did not know how she was doing, so he did not dare to let the two of them take the risk. Rong Xiao did not hesitate. He immediately stepped back when he heard Nan Su Hui's order. A ray of blue light flashed by. A sharp longsword appeared in Nan Su Hui's hand. The long sword was translucent and blue in color. It was about 3 fingers wide, and there were some strange patterns engraved on it. When he swung it, the cold light shone. Nan Su Hui held the sword with both hands and stood in front of him. His aura surged. The next moment, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth seemed to be summoned by something and began to surge toward the sword in front of him. As the energy accumulated on the sword increased, the color on it became deeper and purer. At first glance, it looked like it was carved out of blue jade. Whoosh! The abundant energy of heaven and earth swirled around Nan Su Hui, forming a huge vortex. It was majestic. At this moment, the black palm was closing in on Nan Su Hui. Swoosh! Nan Su Hui raised the sword with both hands and slashed it down. A ray of blue sword light suddenly flew out. Swoosh! Along with this slight sound, the space in front of him was actually split open by a huge spatial crack. Countless black turbulence surged out. At the same time, Shengguan Jing and Elder Meng also moved. Shengguan Jing held a long saber and slashed horizontally. Elder Meng crossed his hands in front of him and threw out a ray of force. In an instant, it condensed into an extremely sharp triangular awl. The three of them each took one side and trapped the black palm in the middle. Between heaven and earth, energy raged. Several forces collided and fell into a chaotic battle. Rong Xiao quickly retreated with Chu Luiyue in his arms. At this moment, they were still under the control of the power of the black palm, so they were surrounded by turbulence. Several sharp auras scraped past their bodies like sharp blades. Chi! A slight air-piercing sound was heard. Rong Xiu's gaze turned sharp as he hugged the person in his arms even tighter and dodged. At the same time, a ball of golden flames suddenly exploded in front of the two of them, forming a wall of fire, blocking the frenzied energy outside of his body. A strand of Chu Liuyue's hair was silently cut off and slowly fell to the ground. Rong Xiu's eyes were suddenly filled with killing intent. A thick black color flashed past his eyes. Cough, cough, cough. At this moment, Chu Liyue suddenly coughed. Rong Xiu immediately looked down and saw her pale face scrunched up. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted, and her thick and long eyelashes were trembling slightly. Almost at the same time, Sheng Wanjing and Elder Meng's forces were also easily shattered by that hand. Their attacks obviously could not stop it at all. What happened in mid-air shocked all the onlookers in the college. Not only the students, but even the experienced and knowledgeable elders were also shocked at this time. No wonder. No wonder Lingshao College had been carefully guarding Mount Wanzhou for so many years, and dared not make any mistakes. It turned out that there was such a terrifying force hidden under the mountain. The hand turned and then clenched in the direction of Rong Xiu and Chu Liyue. From their point of view, they could see the blood-red totem in the center of that hand. Rong Xiu was alerted and retreated again. However, at this time, a powerful force suddenly came from that hand. In an instant, it was like a storm. A turbulent and terrifying aura swept over madly. The water droplets in Chu Liyue's body suddenly spun rapidly, and vaguely, they were about to be snatched away by that hand. Rong Xiu hugged her even tighter, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. However, at this time, he was only a great deity. How could he resist the power of that hand? Countless wounds quickly appeared all over his body. Dark red blood stains silently spread on his white brocade robe. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1548. Chu Liyue suddenly said, "Give me Scarlet Heaven Sword." Rong Xiu frowned and looked at the person in his arms. Of course, he knew what she wanted to do, but how could he agree in such a dangerous situation? Chu Liyue shook her head lightly. "It's looking for me." Moreover, she was the one who had caused this trouble. Naturally, she should be the one to solve it. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were unusually determined. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. Rong Xiu's eyes seemed to be surging. It seemed like a long time, but it also seemed like it was just a moment. A faint but evil smile suddenly appeared on Rong Xiu's handsome and devilish face. His thin scarlet lips curled up slightly. It was magnificent and had an indescribable charm. Chu Liyue was in a daze for a moment. This man had always been cold and noble, but this smile was like an immortal and a demon, unpredictable. Swoosh! A cold light flashed past. He handed Scarlet Heaven's sword to Chu Liyue. "I'll wait for you to come back. If you don't, I'll go find you." His voice was cold and low. Chu Liyue took the sword. "Wait for me." Chu Liyue turned around. Between her eyebrows, it was boiling hot. She touched it subconsciously. It was smooth. That boiling hot feeling quickly disappeared. She frowned slightly, but did not think too much. Holding Scarlet Heaven's sword, she looked at the black palm in front of her. The water droplets in her dantian seemed to be forcefully taken away in the next moment. Chu Liyue gritted her teeth. She channeled the force in her body into Scarlet Heaven's sword. The next moment, she raised the sword with both hands and slashed down. Clang! That hand easily blocked the Scarlet Heaven sword. Then, that hand went straight for Chu Luiyue. Her figure was slender to begin with. At this moment, she seemed even smaller in front of that huge black palm. It was as if that hand could easily crush her body and shatter her bones. When Sheng Wanjing and the others saw this, they were almost scared out of their wits. The few of them wanted to step forward, but they were all blocked by the terrifying pressure. This black palm was truly too powerful, and it caused them to be unable to even take a step closer. Elder Bo Yen and the others were also pale. Even the three of them together couldn't do it, let alone others. Within the academy, on the various mountain peaks, the numerous students who were watching the situation all fell silent. The situation was pretty much set in stone. No matter how powerful Sheng Wanyu and Rong Xiu were, they were no match for the dean and the others. Which one of them didn't dote on Sheng Wanyu? As long as they still had a way out, they wouldn't just stand by and watch this happen. As for the ending, one could almost forget it at a glance. On top of a mountain, Luo Shishir was in a daze, her eyes red. Seeing her like this, Luo Yanlin's fingers twitched. He wanted to stop her from looking. But after hesitating for a long time, that hand finally landed on her head and gently patted her. Luo Shishir's tears fell from her eyes. The black palm grabbed at Chu Luiyue. However, in the next moment, pure gold and transparent flames suddenly surged out of the sword. In the blink of an eye, it had already covered half of the sword. The flames burned brightly, producing an ear-piercing sizzling sound. A thick stench of black smoke spread out from that hand. Woo-woo. In a daze, there seemed to be a mournful whimper coming from that hand. Chu Luiyue was standing right in front of that hand. When he looked up, he could see that there seemed to be countless skeletons floating in that hand. The gloomy and oppressive aura spread wildly in all directions. Chu Luiyue felt a chill run down his spine. Beside Thousand Wine Mountain, on a mountain peak some distance away. In a cave halfway up the mountain, light flickered. Lin Qifei stood beside the huge teleportation formation. His face was pale, and sweat kept dripping from his forehead. In order to support this teleportation formation, the force in his body was almost completely depleted. Because of the exhaustion, his body was already trembling. However, his eyes were still fixed on the teleportation formation. There were a few problems with this teleportation formation, and he had already tried his best to repair them. Now, the only thing he could do was to try his best to maintain it. He did not know how Mu Hongyu was doing, his vision turned black. At a certain moment, he finally could not hold on any longer. His legs gave way, and he fell to the ground. Bang! His body landed heavily on the ground with a dull thud. After resting for a moment, he gritted his teeth and stood up. However, this simple action was already extremely difficult for Lin Qifei. Looking at the teleportation formation that was on the verge of collapse, Lin Qifei's eyes flashed with determination. He took out a dagger and slashed his palm. Dark red blood instantly flowed out. He raised his hand and was about to imprint his blood on the Xian formation. With this, he might be able to buzz. The void shook. Above the teleportation formation, flowing lights suddenly flashed. Lin Qifei paused in his actions. In the next moment, he saw a figure walking out of it. It was Mu Hongyu. Lin Qifei was delighted at first, but when he saw Mu Hongyu covered in blood and in a sorry state, his heart was in his mouth again. Mu Hongyu. Mu Hongyu's ears were buzzing. She had yet to recover from the impact of the spatial turbulence. When she heard this voice, she instinctively looked up. Mu Hongyu, how are you? Lin Qifei walked forward, intending to help Mu Hongyu. However, after taking 2 steps, he staggered again. Upon seeing this, Mu Hongyu hurriedly rushed over to support him. I'm fine, just some flesh wounds. But you. As she spoke, she sized up Lin Qifei and could not help but frown. With Lin Qifei's current age, it was already very difficult for him to build a teleportation formation of this level. Not to mention that he had lasted for so long. Lin Qifei waved his hand. I'm fine. As he spoke, he took out a pill and swallowed it. Mu Hongyu knew that his situation must be very bad, but it was not good for her to ask. She glanced outside. By the way, how long have I been gone? Along the way, she was worried that she would not make it in time. Lin Qifei swallowed the blood between his lips and teeth. Tomorrow is the last day of the 1-month period, but just now, something happened at Thousand Wine Mountain. He had been staying here all this time and did not know what was going on outside. He could only guess from some of the chaotic movements that it should not be anything good. Mu Hongyu heard this and immediately became even more worried. Something happened again. Then, Lin Qifei looked at her. The person you mentioned. Is he here? Mu Hongyu hurriedly nodded. He's here. Originally, we were together, but not long after entering the Divine Ruins world, he asked me to come back alone. Calculating the time, he should be here by now, but I just don't know if he can solve the problem at Thousand Wine Mountain. In mid-air, Chu Liuyue's body flew forward uncontrollably. A terrifying pressure covered the sky and earth, almost crushing her tendons and bones inch by inch. The water droplets in her dantian were about to burst out of her body. Everyone's eyes were covered with a layer of despair. However, just as the black palm was about to clamp down on Chu Liyue, a purple scale suddenly flew over from the horizon. It was floating and agile, but it also contained a shocking power. It arrived in the blink of an eye. Digression, I'm sorry, everyone. My heart was in a mess this morning. 6 p.m. I hope that everyone can cherish their own lives and that of their loved ones. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 1549. The purple scale armor was only the size of a palm. Under the dark night sky, it was inconspicuous. Especially when compared to the huge black palm, it was so small that it could be ignored. However, this small piece of scale flew in front of Chu Liyue and harshly sliced through the black palm. Pest! With a sharp sound, more than half of the thumb on the black palm was sliced off. The suffocating eerie aura around Chu Liyue was instantly cut off. Chu Liyue relaxed and took a deep breath. Fresh air rushed into her lungs and she finally regained her senses. At that moment, she almost thought that she immediately looked in front of her. When she saw the purple scale armor floating in front of her, her eyes widened slightly. After a moment of daze, she suddenly recalled something. This is Debao. She subconsciously turned her head to look around. However, Debao was nowhere to be seen. However, this scale armor was indeed his. They had spent so much time together. She would never mistake it for someone else. The sudden turn of events stunned everyone present. They looked at the purple scale armor blankly and slowly. For a moment, they were unable to react. What is that? It looks similar to the scale armor of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. However, upon closer inspection, it's different, didn't you see it? The moment it appeared, a piece of flesh was sliced off from the black palm. You should know that the joint attack of the Dean and the rest could not hurt the palm at all. What is this thing? It's too powerful. Anyway, I think it's on Sheng Wanyu's side. Perhaps today's situation can be saved. Everyone discussed in low voices. Obviously, they were curious about this thing. When Nan Suwai saw the purple scale armor, he was shocked. A strange look flashed across his eyes. How did that person return? Like Chu Luiyue, he immediately looked around and looked into the distance, searching for something. However, the difference between him and Chu Luiyue was that his actions were very careful and small. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice that he was looking for someone. In addition, there was another person who revealed a look of shock after seeing the purple scale armor. Elder Bo Yen. His brows furrowed tightly, his expression uncertain. When he first saw that thing, he thought he was mistaken. He subconsciously looked at Nan Suwai. When he saw Nan Suwai's expression, he felt a heavy pressure on his heart. He was even more certain of his guess. For a moment, his heart was filled with complicated emotions. Suspicion, surprise, anticipation, fear. He could still clearly remember that on the title page of the Academy's register, there was a scale armor that glowed with a faint purple light. Only the successive headmasters had access to this register, and he was only keeping it temporarily because of the special circumstances of the past few years. From this, he was able to learn a thing or two. But he never thought that he would have the chance to see this scale with his own eyes in his lifetime. Doesn't that mean that person, Bo Yen? Bo Yen. What's wrong? Elder Hua Feng glanced at Elder Bo Yen's strange expression and couldn't help but ask in a low voice. He frowned suspiciously. Do you recognize that thing? Elder Bo Yen's heart skipped a beat, and he shook his head reflexively. No, I don't recognize it. I'm just thinking, where did that thing come from? It's actually so powerful. Elder Hua Feng didn't doubt him. Because at this moment, he was also thinking about the same thing. It's just a small scale armor, but it has such power. It can be seen that its owner is not an ordinary person. Elder Hua Feng narrowed his eyes and stared at it for a while. Could it be that a powerful being has made a move? Elder Bo Yan's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. If it was really that person, it couldn't be described as a powerful being. But 10,000 years had passed, could it be that he was still alive? Moreover, if he really came back, why was there no sign of him? After the purple scale armor appeared, the black palm finally stopped moving for a moment. It seemed to be somewhat fearful. The two confronted each other. Chu Luiyue took out a scarlet pill and swallowed it. The pill melted as soon as it entered her mouth. Soon, a warm aura surged between her chest and abdomen, spreading to her limbs and bones. Her body, which was originally cold, instantly recovered a lot. Chu Luiyue let out a long breath. This fire spirit pill was something she tried to refine when she flipped through the doctor's book of medicine that Elder Wanjing had given her during her free time. Originally, she had planned to show this pill to him when she had time so that he would know that she had broken through to become a doctor. But now, the medicinal pill was for her to consume first. It was used to nourish her body, dispel the cold, and promote blood circulation. Previously, she had stayed in the spring for too long, and her body was cold. At one point, even the blood and force in her body had frozen. Later on, although Rongxiu's help had melted all the frost on her body, there was still a trace of cold energy left in her body. The longer this cold energy stayed in her body, the worse her situation would become. Now that she finally had time, she could completely expel it and remove one of the worries in her heart. She closed her eyes. The water droplet in her dantian seemed to have broken free from the control of the black palm and returned to its normal speed of circulation. Waves of force continuously spread out from it, healing the wounds all over her body. Perhaps because she had broken through to become a high god again, her body's healing speed was much faster than before. In just a short while, some of the wounds had already stopped bleeding and formed scabs. But she still did not dare to let down her guard. Her eyes were fixed in front of her. She suddenly remembered that when Debeo accompanied her to the divine ruins world, he did not like to fight. There seemed to be something hidden behind it. But as to what the reason was, she did not know. Even though she had recovered her memories. In fact, she had met Debeo and the others in the Red Moon Desert. And before that, they had never left the Red Moon Desert. Naturally, she did not know that Debeo had such a taboo. She just did not know how Debeo planned to deal with this situation today. Swoosh! Suddenly, several streaks of purple light flew out from the scale armor. In the blink of an eye, they spread out in midair. Chu Luiyue immediately looked over. She saw several flowing lights intertwining and flying downward. Then, the sky shuttle array that had been forcibly shattered by the black palm gathered together again. The broken parts were reconnected by the purple flowing lights, and the distorted parts were corrected bit by bit. Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something. Debeo was actually repairing the sky shuttle array. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.